everyone, Novels Wonderland here. Thank you all for the love and support you've shown me and the channel.
JJK The Culling Game. Chapter 51 to 67, Chapter 51, A Declaration of War. Chapter 51, A Declaration of War from Sukuna. November 13, 2018, early evening. After 2 hours of rest, Renji's body had basically recovered, but his cursed energy wasn't yet fully restored. He cracked his neck as he walked out of the infirmary. Just as he reached the outer courtyard, he saw Panda sitting on the steps, looking completely down. "Yo, Panda. Why the long face? Did someone die again?" Panda nodded blankly. The culling game was so dangerous that it was only natural for people to die. He walked over, patted Panda on the shoulder, and offered soft words of comfort. "Panda, don't take it too hard. This is war, sacrifices are unavoidable." Panda didn't speak, only nodding tiredly, seemingly unable to process the words. On the other side, Renji shook his head inwardly and decided to give Panda some space to mourn. However, just before leaving, Renji reflexively asked, "So who was it?" "It was Angel, Hana Kurusu. Sukuna killed her." "Oh, Angel, Hana Kurusu." Renji nodded instinctively. His face formed an expression of grief as a silent tribute to the dead, but the sadness only lasted for a single second. The next moment, Renji jerked his head up and stood straight up, looking at Panda in total shock. "What are you talking about? I was only gone for half a day. How did the plot spiral this far?" Renji panicked internally. If she's dead, who's going to break Gojo's seal? What on earth have they been doing? How are we supposed to fight Sukuna? Renji felt his composure crumbling at that moment. Originally, he planned to let Gojo handle Sukuna while he stayed in the back, along with the others during the Shinjuku showdown. As long as he played it safe, there was a high probability of outlasting the King of Curses and completing his challenge. However, the situation had flipped. If Gojo was gone, who would be the first to wear Sukuna down? Panda then explained exactly what happened. After hearing the whole story, Renji sighed helplessly. It was useless to complain now. Sukuna had been resurrected, the only thing to focus on was how to face him. Where are Itadori-kun and Fushiguro-kun? I don't see them around. Itadori went to contact Okatsu, Hikari, and the others. After mentioning Yuta, Panda suddenly remembered something. "Oh, right. Renji-san, you probably don't know who Okatsu is, right? He is our comrade too, and a very powerful special-grade sorcerer." Renji nodded casually and didn't mention that he already knew who Yuta was. Panda continued, "Since Sukuna is back, Itadori plans to call Okatsu back and gather all the forces of the Jujutsu world to discuss how to fight him." "And Fushiguro? What's he doing?" At the mention of Megumi Fushiguro, Panda's expression stiffened. He fell silent for a moment before speaking with a dark look on his face. "Fushiguro has been locked up by the Jujutsu higher-ups. They found out that Sukuna wants to take over his body. The higher-ups believe Fushiguro is a liability who could potentially increase Sukuna's power, so they are discussing his execution." Renji couldn't help but burst out laughing. It was not out of joy, but rather the kind of laugh from frustration. He truly did not expect the logic of the Jujutsu higher-ups to be so strange. After remembering the ridiculous things they had done throughout the series, Renji realized this was exactly something they would do. Still, Renji was curious, and he could not help but ask Panda. "Do the higher-ups not realize that Fushiguro's Maharaga is the one thing most likely to defeat Sukuna? Or does your Jujutsu world have some secret technique that gives them the confidence to beat him?" Regardless of how many times Sukuna had beaten Maharaga before, it remains the best shot at killing him. If Maharaga could adapt to Sukuna's power, it actually has a chance to defeat him. Panda shook his head, unsure if there was a secret trump card. Renji sighed. "I'm just a guy who read the manga. What do I know about the real world here?" He looked up at the gloomy sky and turned to Panda. "Forget it, Panda. What's done is done. Let's get some food first. The Zenin estate. While Renji was preparing to eat, the already destroyed Zenin estate welcomed two new guests. This was the former punishment room, the very place where my Zenin died. A large number of cursed spirits below grade 2 were kept here. The doors creaked open and two figures entered, Kenjaku and the newly resurrected king of curses, Ryaman Sukuna. Kenjaku followed Sukuna with an expressionless face. Even though Sukuna's expression didn't change, Kenjaku could tell that Sukuna was not in a good mood. Is it because of Uram's death? Kenjaku speculated in his mind, but he didn't ask the question out loud. He looked around the enclosed room, and turned to Sukuna curiously. Sukuna, do you need a room like this for something? I need to prepare the bath. Sukuna's cold voice drifted from ahead. Kenjaku had heard of this. It was a ritual used by ancient sorcerer clans to turn weapons into cursed tools, involving a large number of cursed spirits to create a solution soaked in their essence. My soul is not yet fully synchronized with this body. Sukuna continued, I need to submerge myself in the bath to complete it. Usually, Uram handled these preparations, but now that Uram has passed away, Sukuna had to do it himself. The problem was that when cursed spirits are killed, they are easily exorcised and disappear, making it impossible to form a liquid. Because of this, ice was usually needed to freeze the core of the cursed spirits to keep them from dissipating. Since Sukuna lacked ice techniques, he chose to use more cursed spirits. As long as there were enough cursed spirits, it didn't matter if a few died because the remaining ones would still meet the requirements for the bath. Without looking back, Sukuna shouted to Kenjaku. I need cursed spirits. Release yours. Kenjaku nodded helplessly. He finally understood why Sukuna had dragged him along. In an instant, a flood of cursed spirits erupted from his hands, quickly filling the entire room. Kenjaku was mildly interested in the ritual but had no desire to watch the messy process. He had more important things to attend to regarding the culling game. After watching Sukuna begin to kill cursed spirits, Kenjaku scratched his head. Sukuna, I have some business to attend to. I'll be heading out. Sukuna didn't acknowledge him at first, but just as Kenjaku reached the exit, the king of curses spoke. Kenjaku, deliver a message to the people of the Jujutsu world for me. I will come for them in 7 days. Let them make their preparations. A glint of amusement flashed in Kenjaku's eyes. Interesting. He did a quick mental calculation of the date. That would be the morning of November 21, 2018. Sukuna nodded. And the location? Tokyo. Chapter 52, Assemble. 1187 words. November 13, 2018, night. The originally peaceful Star Corridor was suddenly attacked by an unknown parasitic life form. The intruder was none other than the pilot of Suguru Geto's body, the ancient sorcerer from 1,000 years ago, the founder of the Culling Game, and one of the most evil sorcerers in history, Kenjaku. Originally, Kenjaku didn't plan to attack Tengen at the Star Corridor so soon. However, Sukuna's sudden resurrection had disrupted his plan. No one could say for sure how many sorcerers would gather at Jujutsu High next, so Kenjaku had no choice but to attack early. In addition to Tengen, the Star Corridor was guarded by Choso, the eldest of the Cursed Womb, death paintings tasked with protecting Tengen, and Yuki Tsukumo, one of the special grade sorcerers. In fact, with the combined combat power of these two, it was not impossible to repel or even defeat Kenjaku. However, the deadweight Tengen suddenly had a bright idea, and recommended a disastrous plan to Yuki Tsukumo. Tengen instructed Yuki not to expand her domain when facing Kenjaku's domain, womb perfusion. Instead, Tengen wanted to use his barrier techniques to analyze Kenjaku's domain, and dismantle it from the outside to defeat him. However, what Tengen didn't know was that Kenjaku's domain was an open barrier domain. Because of this, Tengen's analysis failed completely. Yuki Tsukumo was essentially set up for death by Tengen, and ended up being split in half. Afterward, there was nothing left in the Star Corridor to stop Kenjaku. The next day, as soon as Renji woke up, he saw Panda running toward him with an anxious look on his face. Without even asking, Renji knew some bad news was coming. What happened now? Tingen-sama has been taken by Kenjaku. Renji's expression didn't change. This wasn't new to him. That's it. Anything else? Yes. Panda paused for a moment and continued, Sukuna sent us a declaration of war through Kenjaku. He said he's going to start the final battle against us in Tokyo on the morning of the 21st, and told us to get ready. This news finally made Renji gasp. The 21st is way too early. Will Nobara Kujisaki even wake up by then? We need her resonance to have a chance to win this. Panda interrupted Renji's thoughts and pulled him by the hand. Renji-chan, don't just think by yourself. Okatsu and the others are back. Let's go discuss this together. A moment later, Panda brought him into a large conference room, and many people were already seated inside, most of whom Renji had never seen. He could only recognize Yuji and Megumi sitting in the corner. Seeing Megumi present, Renji nodded inwardly. It seems the jujitsu higher-ups aren't complete idiots after all. They know how important combat power is at a time like this. Seeing Renji arrive, Yuji stood up happily. Renji-san, are your injuries healed? I'm fine. Renji's words caught everyone's attention. After realizing the others didn't know him, Yuji hurried to introduce him. This is the sorcerer who gave me 96 points in Tokyo Colony No. 2. He is also the one who defeated the strongest sorcerer from 400 years ago, Hajime Kashimo. This is Renji-san. The name Hajime Kashimo caught the attention of one person present. He stood up, walked over to Renji, and looked him up and down. You defeated Kashimo. You don't look like much. Even though Renji had never met the man before, he recognized him immediately the moment he saw the pompadour-like hairstyle. Ryu Ishigori. He was a sorcerer from the same era as Hajime Kashimo, and Kenjaku had described him as having a terrifying cursed energy output. Like Sukuna, he was a powerful sorcerer who had dominated an era and never encountered a truly formidable opponent. This time, after being resurrected, Ryu Ishigori was hunting for strong fighters, and Kashimo was one of his targets. However, there was no chance for that now, because Kashimo had already lost to Renji. Before Renji could speak, a man with short black hair stepped between Renji and Ryu Ishigori, raising his hands to separate the two. Wait, we're all on the same side. Let's not start a conflict. The short-haired man calmed Ishigori down and turned to Renji. Hello, Renji-san. My name is Yuta Okatsu. This is Ryu Ishigori. He doesn't mean any harm, and he's just interested in strong people. Renji looked Yuta Okatsu up and down. After so many deaths, this was the first time he actually met Yuta. Yuta looked at Renji and asked curiously. I heard from Panda that you also helped deal with Fushiguro's Maharaga. You could say that. Renji nodded. Yuta looked at him with admiration. Renji-san is truly amazing. To be able to handle Maharaga, if it were me, I'm afraid I wouldn't have any way to deal with it at all. If it weren't for you, Panda and the others might have been in trouble. I'm so glad everyone is okay. After the small interlude, Renji found a seat. As the last few people walked into the conference room, everyone was finally present. Since many didn't know each other, Yuta took the lead in introductions. Through his introductions, Renji finally learned who was present. These people had been gathered, some willingly, some by necessity, to discuss how to handle Sukuna. There were quite a few sorcerers, but their power levels varied greatly, and many of them would likely be useless in front of Sukuna. After excluding those people, there weren't many sorcerers who explicitly stated they were willing to step onto the battlefield to duel Sukuna. They were Yuta Okatsu, Hikari Kinji, Maki Zenin, Yuji Itadori, Megumi Fushiguro, Atsuya Kizakabe, Takuma Ino, Ryu Ishigori, Hiromi Higuruma, Rinji Kuratsuki, and lastly, who had escaped from the Star Corridor, Choso. Choso was in bad shape, with multiple bandages on his body. Yuta looked at him with concern. Choso, are you okay? Do you need more rest? Choso shook his head. No need. My injuries don't matter. We don't have much time, let's get to business. In that case, please tell us about the events at the Star Corridor once more, Choso. Yuta said. A flash of pain crossed Choso's eyes. He then nodded and repeated the process of Kenjaku's invasion of the Star Corridor. Kenjaku actually had a chance to kill me, but he wanted me to deliver a message to all of you, so he let me go on purpose. Kenjaku said that Sukuna wanted him to give us a message. That message was that Sukuna will fight us in a final battle in Tokyo on the morning of the 21st, and he told us to get ready. The name Sukuna caused the atmosphere to freeze instantly. This was the legendary king of curses. Immediately, a sense of despair began to spread through the room. But right at that moment, Choso's next sentence jolted everyone. Kenjaku told me that Sukuna's current strength is not at its full state, and we shouldn't feel so much pressure with 3 of Sukuna's fingers were destroyed by the angel's Jacob's ladder before. Chapter 53, Forbidden Tactics. 1208 words. Rinji, who listened in from the crowd, raised his head sharply. Sukuna's 3 fingers were destroyed. From Panda, Rinji knew that Yuji and Megumi slipped back to the scene a few hours after they fled from Sukuna. Based on the residual cursed energy on the ground and the traces left at the scene, they deduced what had happened back then. Angel must have released her curse technique and hit something, but they were not sure exactly who she hit. It wasn't until he heard Choso's words just now that Rinji finally pieced it together. Angel's Jacob's ladder must have hit Uram. Uram was carrying 3 of Sukuna's fingers, which he had collected secretly over all these years, originally planning to hand them over to Sukuna after his resurrection. However, before Uram could hand the fingers over to Sukuna, he was struck by Jacob's ladder, vanishing entirely along with the fingers. Rinji rejoiced in his heart. Doesn't this mean that the current Sukuna has, at most, the cursed energy of 16 fingers, plus the mummified corpse, which is 17? Thanks to my last challenge, I have the cursed energy equivalent to 19 of Sukuna's fingers. Rinji wasn't the only one celebrating, and a relief broke through the blanket of despair hanging over everyone in the room. Sukuna's current state wasn't his complete form. They might actually have a chance to win. Yuta Okatsu looked at Choso gratefully. Choso, thank you for bringing this information. This is truly heartening news. He slowly stood up and scanned everyone in the room. Everyone, I know Gojo-sensei is gone, and everyone is terrified. Sukuna is strong, so strong that even if all of us here charge at him together, we might still be no match for him. However, a flash of determination crossed Yuta's face. I believe Sukuna is definitely not invincible. As long as we coordinate properly, it is not impossible to fight him. Yuta's words made the conference room go silent. After a few moments, Rinji was the first to stand up, shouting at the top of his lungs. Indeed. I do not understand why everyone keeps talking about Gojo Satoru being trapped in the prison realm. It is as if this war is destined to be an ill omen for us. 13 days ago, I set out on my expedition from Tokyo, beginning my journey as a jujitsu sorcerer. The Tokyo No. 1 colony was unified under my command. The jujitsu sorcerers welcomed us with utmost sincerity. It could truly be said that we held the absolute advantage of time and opportunity. Rinji's voice was deafening and profound. They instinctively lifted their heads, and a spark of passion ignited in their eyes one after another. He looked at the people in the room with a firm expression and shouted. No matter what, the combat force for this battle is the entire jujitsu world against Sukuna alone. The advantage is on our side. To ensure better cooperation, everyone introduced their technique one by one, including range. I can basic control some lightning, and I can also use electricity to stimulate my body to get a physical reinforcement effect. That's it? Ryu Ishigori asked back in surprise. Yes, that's it. At this moment Yuji, who was standing to the side, suddenly spoke up. Ah. Renji-san, don't you also have a curse technique release? Yuji's words piqued the curiosity of everyone present. Panda, who had witnessed it firsthand, raised his paws high and shouted excitedly. You guys don't know, but Renji-chan's technique release is truly crazy. He can turn into a massive lightning beast. Renji waved his hands and then said with some embarrassment. This technique of mine is better suited for solo combat. Panda, you should remember that after my technique is released, lightning bolts discharge uncontrollably around me, right? A trace of lingering fear flashed through Panda's eyes at those words. He still remembered the feeling of being zapped because he hadn't managed to run away in time. Renji looked at the crowd. I'm still not suited to cooperate with others. When the time comes, why not just let me take on Sukuna in a one-on-one fight? Renji wasn't the only one with this thought. Ryu Ishigori nodded, leaning back in his chair and resting his feet on the table. Indeed. I'm not really cut out for teamwork either. When the time comes, I'll take Sukuna on one-on-one too. Ishigori's words made Yuta Okatsu nearly lose his composure. What part of your ability makes you unsuited to cooperate with others? All you have to do is fire your granite blast from the back. Ishigori-san, please don't be like that. Sukuna is incredibly powerful. We have to cooperate to have any chance of victory. Looking into Yuta's eyes, Ryu Ishigori scratched his head helplessly. Fine, fine, you call the shots, and I will cooperate with whatever plan you guys have. Speaking of plan, Renji suddenly came up with an idea, and held up a finger. Everyone, I actually have a great idea. Do you want to hear it? Hearing that Renji had a plan, everyone's interest was piqued. May I ask what kind of plan you're referring to, Renji-san? He cleared his throat and said with an excited look on his face. We gather a whole truckload of feces ahead of time, and pack it into a fuel tanker. We hurl it right at him when the battle starts. Sukuna will definitely use his slashing attacks when he sees it coming. Then, seeing a sky full of flying crap, he's bound to freeze for a second. We can seize that exact moment to hit him with a massive sneak attack. If Sukuna fights back, he'll have to eat crap. If he doesn't fight back, he has to take our sneak attack. Renji's words left everyone in the room stunned, and the anticipation on their faces instantly froze. Seeing that the crowd hadn't responded, Renji opened his mouth again. I have one more plan. However, before he could finish, Yuta hastily cut him off. Renji-san, please stop coming up with plans for now. We should still think of other ways. Don't be in such a rush, this one is a real plan. He quickly interrupted Yuta's interruption and spoke rapidly. I remember your Jujutsu High also has the straw doll technique, right? Yuta, can't you copy other people's curse techniques? During the battle, you copy the straw doll technique, and while we're fighting on the front lines, you just stay in the back and hammer away at Sukuna like crazy. I refuse to believe Sukuna won't be affected at all. The 3 words straw doll technique made Yuta pause. He turned his head to look at Yuji beside him, completely at a loss for words. The straw doll technique belonged to Nobara Kojisaki of Jujutsu High, who was currently in a coma, with her life hanging in the balance. Meanwhile, Yuta's copying technique required him to consume a body part of the target sorcerer. If Yuta wanted to copy it, they would have to cut off a piece of flesh from the unconscious Nobara Kojisaki and have Yuta eat it. The thought of consuming the flesh of a former comrade made Yuta Okatsu hesitate. Chapter 54, The Most Rational Plan. 1248 words. Right at that moment, Shoko Yeri, wearing her white lab coat among the crowd, raised her hand. If you're willing, I can help cut away a piece of Nobara's flesh or something similar. Even if she wakes up in the future, it won't affect her daily life. Shoko Yeri was the most skilled doctor at Jujutsu High. She not only mastered the RCT, but she also mastered outputting it to others. She was one of the few people in the jujitsu world who could use the RCT to heal other people. Since she had given such a guarantee, it meant she was confident that Nobara would not suffer any permanent disability in the future. This caused Yuta, who had been hesitating, to waver. He finally looked at Yuji and Megumi. Since the two of them were Kujisaki's classmates from the same year, Yuta felt it was necessary to get their consent. Yuji lowered his head, making it impossible to see what he was thinking. After a brief moment, he looked back up. Let's do it. I think even if Kujisaki wakes up in the future, she won't blame you. After Yuji took the lead, a few jujitsu sorcerers at the scene breathed a sigh of relief. The tactic provided by Renji was highly practical. The straw doll technique was incredibly effective for sneak attacks. If someone could use the straw doll technique on Sukuna from the rear while others were battling him on the front lines, it might truly cause massive trouble for Sukuna. They had been terrified that Yuji would lead an opposition against doing anything to the comatose Kujisaki, which would make the tactic impossible to carry out. However, even though they were now prepared to implement this plan, a very serious problem remained. Maki frowned from among the crowd and asked. If I remember correctly, the straw doll technique requires a part of the enemy's body, right? Don't tell me we have to chop off a piece of Sukuna's body during the battle and bring it back first. Yuta shook his head immediately. There's no need for that. Sukuna has a total of 20 fingers. I remember Gojo-sensei kept one finger hidden away for himself. We can use that finger to perform the straw doll technique when the time comes. Hearing this, several people from Jujutsu High turned their gazes toward Yuji. They all knew that the higher-ups of Jujutsu High had made an agreement with Satoru Gojo. Once Yuji consumed all 20 of Sukuna's fingers, he would be executed to destroy Sukuna's fingers along with him. It looks like Gojo had no intention of fulfilling this agreement at all and secretly hid one of Sukuna's fingers. This way, Yuji would never be able to gather all 20 fingers, and he would never reach the reality of his execution. With Yuta's words, the first tactic against Sukuna was officially confirmed. Now, who would fight Sukuna on the front lines to create an opportunity for Yuta to use the straw doll technique from the back? Hearing that someone needed to fight Sukuna, Megumi, who had remained silent in the crowd, stood straight up. Let me go. I will directly summon Maharaga to stall Sukuna. The name Maharaga sent a jolt through the sorcerers present. In the past, Maharaga wasn't that famous, and was in existence known only to a small number of higher-ups. But after Megumi's multiple summons, any well-informed jujitsu sorcerer of this era had witnessed Maharaga's terror. Maharaga's dealing with Sukuna was indeed a solid choice. However, a firm voice suddenly echoed from the crowd, directly rejecting the proposal. I don't think that's a good idea. They followed the source of the voice and saw Renji's mocking face. You guys underestimate Sukuna way too much. He figured out how to deal with Maharaga's fighting style a long time ago. If you summon Maharaga, he'll probably take it out in a single round. It won't buy you any time at all. Aside from letting him warm up, what purpose would it serve? Megumi's expression stiffened as the pressure hit him instantly, and his face began to flush with frustration. Of course, Fushiguro-kun, don't misunderstand. I'm not targeting you specifically. He hurriedly waved his hands at Megumi and smiled as he scanned everyone in the room. I'm saying that everyone here is trash. The faces of all the sorcerers in the room darkened instantly. Ignoring them, Renji continued to speak. You probably all know Sukuna's strength. Even if we all attack together, we might not necessarily exhaust his cursed energy. If we're talking about who among us actually stands a chance at ultimately killing Sukuna, I am afraid there is only one person. They paused for a moment, unsure of who he was talking about. Suddenly, Renji turned his head to look at Megumi, staring at him with a serious expression. Megumi raised his hand and pointed at himself in a slight panic. Me? Megumi didn't understand why Renji would evaluate him this way. He didn't even have that kind of confidence himself. Renji's explanation followed immediately. Obviously, it's not you but your Maharaga. Megumi's face tightened as a wave of bitter reality washed over him. Megumi sending Maharaga out at the very beginning to fight a battle against Sukuna, and waste his cursed energy was beneficial for Renji to defeat Sukuna in the end. In fact, he could choose not to make a move at all, letting the people of the Jujutsu world go first to wear down Sukuna's strength, while he waited until the very end to make his move. However, Renji didn't want to do that. During his days living in this world, all the people and events felt incredibly real to him. He couldn't fully convince himself that this world was just a challenge, nor could he treat it like a game, calculating his next moves from self-interest. To him, this journey was just a challenge. Even if he died at Sukuna's hands, he could completely try again. However, it was different for the people of this world. Regardless of whether I would see these people again in a new world, their lives only happened once for them of this world. If they lost by Sukuna's hand, they would truly be gone forever. Therefore, Renji was still willing to help them complete the mission to kill Sukuna. It didn't matter whether he could survive in the end anyway because he would not truly die. If I die this time, I can just come back next time. There was only one safe way to defeat Sukuna, in a world without Gojo Satoru. That was to let them wear down Sukuna's cursed energy and strength on the front lines first. Once Sukuna's power was mostly exhausted, Megumi Fushiguro would then summon Maharaga. As long as Sukuna couldn't instantly kill Maharaga, the one to win in the end would definitely be Maharaga due to its continuous adaptation. Renji slowly explained his tactic regarding the use of Maharaga. Fushiguro-kun, during the early phase of the battle, you absolutely cannot make a move. Only when Sukuna has been worn down by us to a certain extent, can you step in to deliver the final blow. I understand. Megumi let out a slow, quiet breath, his hands tightening into fists as he looked back up at Renji. If that's what it takes to bring him down, I'll do it. I'll wait for the right moment. Chapter 55, The Order. 1291 words. Renji's plan instantly caught the attention of everyone present. A few sorcerers who originally lacked confidence in defeating Sukuna felt a ray of hope ignite in their hearts. It seemed that, based on this plan, they might actually have a genuine chance of eliminating Sukuna in the end. They focused on Megumi. The execution of this plan had a critical flaw, which was that Megumi's mortality rate at the end would be extremely high. For the other sorcerers fighting Sukuna, it might be a narrow escape from death. But for Megumi, who would be the one releasing Maharaga at the very end, it was almost a guaranteed death sentence. Once the plan succeeded, Megumi would have to face the surviving Maharaga that had just defeated Sukuna. Given the remaining strength of the Jujutsu world, it was practically impossible to kill Maharaga, and Megumi, as the one who summoned it, would die right along with it. Megumi nodded earnestly. I understand. I will wait until the very end to release Maharaga. As Megumi's companion, Yuji looked at him with some worry, but there was nothing he could say. No one had the ability to guarantee their own survival when it came to Sukuna. If sacrificing Megumi alone could truly get rid of Sukuna in the end, it would already be considered a massive victory. Moreover, perhaps they could time it right at the limit, allowing Maharaga to exhaust the last of Sukuna's strength. Then, the remaining forces of the Jujutsu world could step in to finish Sukuna off, and Megumi might actually survive in the end. Renji nodded in satisfaction. Now that the overall strategy was in place, it was time to consider the specific details of the battle. He looked at everyone present. Then let's decide the order of facing Sukuna. Sukuna is no ordinary sorcerer, and rushing him all at once might not be a good idea, so fighting in waves is probably more suitable. Hearing this, Ishigori, who had been leaning back in his chair, sat straight up. He adjusted his pompadour hairstyle, his face brimming with confidence. In his view, there were two special-grade sorcerers present, one was Yuta Okatsu, and the other was himself. Since Yuta had to stay in the back to use the straw doll technique for sneak attacks, the mission of holding the front line and dealing with Sukuna naturally fell to him. In that case, I will go. As Ishigori was halfway through his sentence, Renji suddenly cut him off. I don't think there is any sorcerer here stronger than me, so I will go first. Hey. What do you mean there's no one stronger than you? You think I can just pretend I didn't hear that, you bastard? Ishigori instantly lost his temper. He glared at Renji and pointed outside with a look of resentment. If you've got the guts, let's go outside and spar to see who is truly the strongest sorcerer. Now? You sure you can even last 1 second from Sukuna? Renji looked at Ishigori reluctantly. Let's not. Isn't the Battle of Tokyo about to start? How about we save it for another day? Even though Renji was quite interested in sparring with Ishigori, now was simply not the time. He wanted to use this time to do some last-minute training, and getting injured right now would be a massive hassle. However, looking at the stubborn look in Ishigori's eyes, Renji knew he couldn't just do nothing. He scratched his head helplessly and sighed. Sigh, let's forget about an actual fight. How about this? Why don't we compare the capacity of our cursed energy? The capacity of our cursed energy. Ishigori paused for a moment and then nodded confidently, fine by me. Ishigori's curse technique was pure cursed energy output. He was extremely confident when it came to cursed energy reserves. However, just as he released his suppression over his cursed energy and prepared to unleash his pressure, an incredibly dominant force pressed down on him instantly. It wasn't just Ishigori. In that single instant, everyone present felt as if they were looking at a demon straight out of hell. Renji, who had previously looked completely ordinary, suddenly erupted with a terrifyingly immense amount of cursed energy. A nearly tangible black aura surged from his body, making it feel as if the entire sky was about to darken. Ishigori stared at him in absolute disbelief. How? How can your cursed energy reserves be this massive? Even Yuta Okatsu's eyes were filled with shock. He always believed that his own cursed energy reserves were enormous, to the point that even his teacher, Satoru Gojo, couldn't match him. Yet, the person standing before him, who had only become a jujitsu sorcerer a dozen or so days ago, possessed a cursed energy reserve far greater than his own. The others didn't feel it quite as clearly, but to Megumi and Yuji, who witnessed Sukuna firsthand, it was a different story. The pressure of the cursed energy on Renji's body right now seemed higher than Sukuna's. As Sukuna's former vessel, Yuji swallowed hard as he looked at Renji. Renji-san, why do I feel like you have even more cursed energy than Sukuna? They were startled, looking at Renji as if they were looking at a monster. Renji laughed loudly and immediately pulled back his released cursed energy. Ha, you're joking, Itadori-kun. My cursed energy is only a tiny bit more than yours. The people present only gave awkward smiles, and no one took his word for it. They could all see clear as day that Renji's cursed energy wasn't just a tiny bit larger than theirs. At this point, Ishigori couldn't utter a single word. The cursed energy radiating from Renji made it impossible for him to even entertain the idea of a competition. Yuta looked at Ishigori, then suddenly spoke up. Renji-san, after your technique release, it's not suitable for teammates to get close to you, right? But Ishigori-san's granite blast can fire from a distance. How about we let you and Ishigori-san go together for the first wave of battle? You can use your technique release to engage Sukuna in close combat, while Ishigori-san provides backup with his granite blast from afar. A look of joy appeared on Ishigori's face, and his eyes lit up as he looked at Renji. Renji paused for a moment. If Ishigori isn't afraid of getting caught in my crossfire, I don't mind. It's just, is your granite blast accurate, Ishigori? It'll be pretty awkward if you accidentally hit me. Accurate? As if hearing something deeply insulting, Ishigori immediately shouted, my discharge is famously precise. If I say I'm hitting the third eyelash of your left eye, I absolutely will not hit the fourth. Ishigori snorted while pulling a small comb out of nowhere and elegantly brushing his pompadour. Then it's settled. On the morning of the 21st, I'll join you in the showdown against Sukuna. Once Sukuna's strength is mostly depleted, that Kid Fushiguro will step up to unleash Maharaga and finish Sukuna off for good. Hearing this, Yuta could only manage a bitter smile as he shook his head. If only things could actually go that smoothly. Renji and Ishigori alone might not be able to exhaust Sukuna's strength at all, and there was a high probability that everyone present would have to take the fight when the time came. Yuta even wanted to take down Sukuna all by himself, but unfortunately, his strength couldn't achieve that. He let out a sigh, and he couldn't help but recall Satoru Gojo in his mind. Gojo-sensei, if only you were still here. If it were you, you definitely would have been able to defeat Sukuna. Chapter 56, Contingency. 1194 words. Chapter 56, Pre-War Special Training. Just as Renji and Ishigori had finalized their initial plan to be the first to fight Sukuna, a hand suddenly shot up from the crowd. It belonged to Hiromi Higuruma, who had remained silent until now. He spoke with an expressionless face. "Let me go first." "Huh?" Ishigori glared at Higuruma in dissatisfaction. Ignoring the scoffing Ishigori, Higuruma immediately laid out his ability. "As long as my domain judges the enemy guilty, it can confiscate their cursed technique or cursed energy. If you let me go first, I can confiscate Sukuna's slashing technique directly. Furthermore, if I can sentence him to death, I can also use the executioner's sword, and anyone slashed by it dies instantly. This is a rule-based ability, and there is a high probability it will work on Sukuna too." Higuruma's words caused Ishigori to drop his aggressive posture. He looked at Higuruma in stunned silence. What is wrong with the sorcerers of this era? Why is every single one of them as strong as a monster? The strategy Higuruma proposed seemed highly feasible, and even Yuta began to lower his head in deep thought. However, Renji slowly shook his head and looked at Higuruma. "Higuruma-san, can your technique be used on anyone?" "Of course." Higuruma nodded, not quite understanding where this was going. "Then, can you try using it on me?" "Huh?" Higuruma's expression froze, slightly confused about what Renji wanted to do. Seeing that Renji's expression didn't look like a joke, Higuruma then stood up. "All right, here I come then." The next moment, a gavel appeared in Higuruma's hand, and he spoke slowly. "Domain expansion, deadly sentank." Yet, before Higuruma could finish his words, Renji completely vanished from his spot. A flash of lightning sparked, and Renji's figure appeared behind Higuruma once again. Renji's hand gripped Higuruma's wrist, while his other hand pressed firmly against his neck. Sigh. Renji let out a sigh and released the pinned Higuruma. "Higuruma-san, your domain expansion speed is too slow. With Sukuna's slashing speed, he can easily interrupt you before your domain even expands." A domain expansion wasn't something that could only be resisted by relying on another domain or a simple domain. As long as a person was fast enough, it was actually possible to fight by interrupting the opponent's domain. It was just like Mahito. Facing Modulo Yuji Itadori, Mahito tried to execute self-embodiment of perfection to outwit him. But before Mahito could even open his domain, Modulo Yuji counterattacked with a single slash and instantly killed him. With Sukuna's slashing speed, interrupting Higuruma before deadly sentencing could manifest was completely achievable. Especially in this world, where Sukuna wouldn't know the effects of Higuruma's domain. At the very start of the battle, Sukuna's mind would be highly focused, and he probably wouldn't allow himself to get caught in an unknown domain. Renji looked at Higuruma. "Higuruma-san, you can't just cast your domain directly at Sukuna. You have to wait for a moment when he is distracted. The probability of hitting him will be much higher then." Higuruma didn't argue and knew the effectiveness of his technique would indeed be much better if used for a sneak attack. Having witnessed Renji's prowess once again, none of the sorcerers present raised any further objections. After a final round of confirmation, a rough battle strategy was officially established. At the very beginning of the battle, Renji and Ishigori would fight Sukuna. Renji would fight at close range while Ishigori would provide support from a distance using his Ranite Blast. If they were defeated, Higuruma would then look for an opportunity to open his domain to confiscate Sukuna's technique. Simultaneously, Kinji Hikari, Maki Zenin, and Yuji Itadori would enter the battlefield to jump on Sukuna. Meanwhile, Yuta Okatsu would stay in the rear the entire time to disrupt Sukuna using the straw doll technique. Once Sukuna's condition visibly deteriorated, Megumi would enter the battlefield to summon Maharaga, dragging Sukuna into the exorcism ritual. If Sukuna ended up being killed by Maharaga, it would be the best-case scenario, and the battle would essentially be over. But if Maharaga lost, Yuta Okatsu would then enter the battlefield to engage in the final showdown against Sukuna. With Rika by his side, Yuta didn't need to worry about running out of cursed energy. Even if he drained his cursed energy by using the straw doll technique earlier, Yuta could still replenish it through Rika. Hearing that he was the final safety net, a flicker of pain crossed Yuta's face. He couldn't imagine the scene where his comrades fell in battle before him, leaving him to fight at the very end. He even worried whether he could shoulder the heavy responsibility of killing Sukuna, if things actually reached that point. Lost in thought, Yuta couldn't help but murmur to himself, "Will I really win?" Just then, a soft paw slapped firmly onto Yuta's shoulder. He turned around to see Panda giving him a thumbs up. "Don't worry too much, Okatsu. We will win." After the tactics were officially confirmed, a heavy weight settled into everyone's hearts. Suddenly, Yuji remembered something. He let out a gasp and looked at Renji. "Renji-san, I remember you don't seem to know how to use domain expansion, right? Is it really okay for you to be the first to fight Sukuna?" The moment Yuji finished his sentence, Ishigori looked at Renji as if he had seen a ghost. "You don't know domain expansion." "I really don't know it yet." Renji scratched his head awkwardly. "But I remember you can use reverse cursed technique, right?" "Yeah. You can literally use reverse cursed technique, but you don't know domain expansion." "Ah." Renji blanked for a moment, asking weakly, "Is there a connection between the two?" He pointed to Shoko, who was standing nearby. "Shoko-chan over here can even output reverse cursed technique to others, and she doesn't know domain expansion either, right?" Suddenly called out by name, Shoko Yeri almost choked. She took a breath and looked at him with a slight grimace. Maybe don't call me Shoko-chan. It's a bit gross." Putting honorifics aside, Yuta looked at Renji with a solemn expression. "Renji-san, if you don't know domain expansion, the plan needs to change. You can't be the first one to go up." However, Renji waved his hand dismissively. "What is there to change? I remember your Jujutsu High has techniques like Falling Blossom Emotion and Simple Domain, right? Just teach me, and once I learn it, won't I be able to resist Sukuna's domain?" Yuta's expression remained somewhat hesitant. "There isn't much time left." "Can you really learn it in time, Renji-san?" Even though Renji lacked any actual confidence, it didn't stop him from making a promise. He confidently slapped his chest and shouted, "Yes. I'm a genius, after all. If I can even learn the reverse curse technique, I can definitely learn a simple domain." The words made sense, and the logic held up. The difficulty of the reverse curse technique was much greater than that of a simple domain. He should be able to learn it effortlessly, right? Chapter 57, Shinjuku Showdown. 1,337 words. The night of November 20th, 2018. Sukuna had not left the jujitsu world for much time. The 7 days flew by in the blink of an eye, and the date of the promised showdown was fast approaching. During these 7 days, everyone was making their final preparations. They racked their brains for any possible way to increase their strength and push their limits. Among them, under Renji's persuasion, Yuji Itadori consumed the remaining cursed womb, death paintings kept at Jujutsu High, successfully acquiring the blood manipulation technique. Furthermore, by sensing the residual power Sukuna had left behind in his body, Yuji managed to grasp a simplified version of Sukuna's shrine. Yuji's version of the shrine was still quite crude, and could only use the slashing attack dismantle, and much like cleave, he had to physically touch the enemy due to his lack of mastery. To make matters funnier, whenever Yuji used it, dotted lines resembling the cut along the dotted line markings on a delivery package would appear on his target. Moreover, to counter potential domain expansions, Yuji utilized UI's soul-swapping ability to learn the new shadow style, simple domain from Atsuya Kyuzukabe. It could be said that within these 7 short days, Yuji had completely transformed. Aside from not having learned a domain expansion yet, he learned everything else he needed to know. In terms of ability or mindset, Yuji was no longer as weak as he was 7 days ago. Besides Yuji, Yuta Okatsu had also successfully learned the straw doll technique with the help of Shoko Yeri. More importantly, by going through the contact directory recorded within Jujutsu High, Yuta successfully tracked down Nobara Kujisaki's grandmother. It turned out Grandma Kujisaki's innate technique was also the straw doll technique. At Yuta's invitation, Grandma Kujisaki joined the Jujutsu World's forces to fight alongside them in the final battle against Sukuna in Tokyo. Thanks to her personal guidance, Yuta had basically mastered the practical application and techniques of the straw doll technique. During the 7 days of emergency training, Choso's piercing blood became even faster, Higuruma's hand-to-hand combat was reinforced, Maki's hand-to-hand combat went up another level, Hikari restrained himself from gambling to accumulate his luck, and even Megumi specially trained his speaking speed. Now, Megumi could chant the ritual much faster to ensure that he wouldn't face the possibility of being interrupted by Sukuna halfway through his casting. During these 7 days, the Jujutsu world accomplished a lot of things. Renji also remembered that Aoi Tadu made an appearance during the Shinjuku showdown in the original plot. However, over the past few days, he hadn't heard a single mention of Tadu from Yuta. In the original plot, Tadu was worried that the unstoppable resonance between Yuji and Sukuna's bodies might subconsciously leak his existence and ruin their tactics. Thus, he asked Mei to hide his presence. It was highly likely that the Tadu of this world shared the same concerns, which was why he hadn't revealed himself to Yuta. During training, Renji had also seen Yuta consulting the one-armed Toge Inumaki about something. Perhaps he was asking for advice on the cursed speech technique. They were preparing for the final showdown, and to some degree, they had all achieved their own growth. Except for one person. Jujutsu High. Atsuya Kyuzukabe, who just finished the soul swap, looked at Renji in front of him with lifeless eyes. He refused to give up and spoke to Renji. Renji-kun, even with the soul swap, you still can't learn the simple domain. Kyuzukabe could never have imagined that Renji, whom he viewed as a genius, still couldn't master a simple domain after nearly 7 days. This was even with the assistance of UI's technique. UI's curse technique didn't just allow him to teleport people through space, but could also swap the souls of marked individuals. Relying on this technique, UI could directly place Renji's soul into Kyuzukabe's body, so he could physically experience the mechanism of a simple domain. The problem was that Renji had experienced it plenty of times, but he just couldn't grasp it. I can't help it either, Renji said with a completely straight face. Kyuzukabe fell silent for a moment, let out a long sigh, and turned to look at Yuta. Okatsu, I'm truly out of options. I really can't teach Renji-kun's simple domain. Yuta quickly comforted Kyuzukabe. Don't worry, Kyuzukabe-sensei, this isn't your fault. He then turned his head toward Renji, looking concerned. Renji-san, you haven't learned simple domain. What are you going to do during the decisive battle in Shinjuku later? How about you join the battle a bit later? Exactly. Aside from them, Ishigori immediately agreed with Okatsu's suggestion. Fighting Sukuna without a domain expansion puts you at too much of a disadvantage. It's better to let me go first. At this moment, there weren't many people left in the Jujutsu world who could use domain expansion. There were only 4, Yuta Okatsu, Ryu Ishigori, Kinji Hikari, Hiromi Higuruma, and Megumi Fushiguro. Yuta needed to stay in the rear to hammer the nails, Higuruma needed to seize the exact right moment to enter the field, and Hikari's ability wasn't suited for a first-wave attack against Sukuna, as he could easily die before he hit the jackpot. For a moment, Ryu Ishigori seemed to be the most suitable candidate to face Sukuna first. However, amidst the crowd, Renji's firm words cut off Ishigori's momentum. No need. We'll stick to the plan. I'll be the first to go up. Yuta looked at Renji in a panic. Renji-san, a domain expansion is no joke. There's no need to force yourself. Renji smiled and waved his hand dismissively. It's fine. I have my own way of dealing with Sukuna's malevolent shrine. You guys don't need to worry. This. Yuta was somewhat skeptical, assuming Renji was just putting on a brave face. Would I really gamble with my own life? Renji's words made Yuta relax slightly. All right. Yuta nodded hesitantly, then give it a try first, Renji-san. If you feel like something's wrong, retreat immediately. We'll be on standby at the perimeter to back you up at any moment. To better fight Sukuna, the people involved in the confrontation included not only combatants like Yuta but also some support personnel. Among them, Mei, a grade 1 sorcerer, wouldn't take the field herself, but she would use her cursed technique to control crows for a remote live broadcast. Through the broadcast, Yuta and the others could safely observe the front lines from the rear and monitor the battle. Don't worry, if I feel like something is wrong, I will definitely run. You know my cursed technique is unmatched when it comes to speed. As he spoke, crackling arcs of electricity began surging across Renji's body, and the sparks forced the few people standing close to him to take a step back. Right then, Yuji suddenly looked at Renji and raised his hand. Renji-san, your cursed energy is getting in the way. He was stunned for a moment, but immediately understood what Yuji meant. He laughed out loud, deactivated his cursed energy, and pointed at his own back. Haha. Come at me with everything you've got. Yuji laughed out loud as well, slapping Renji heavily on the shoulder. Afterwards, Yuta and the others no longer held back. They all showed relaxed smiles and gave Renji their blessings. Go get Renji-chan. Show Sukuna who the real challenger is. I still feel like you should let me go first. I'd definitely win. To all the cheering and encouragement, Renji replied with a single word full of confidence. All right. As the darkness of the night faded, the sun rose once more. The atmosphere inside Jujutsu High grew incredibly heavy, and there wasn't a single smile on anyone's face. They all sat together with solemn expressions. Even without anyone pointing it out, they all knew that the day of the Shinjuku showdown with Sukuna had arrived. Chapter 58, Shinjuku Showdown. 1174 words. The morning of November 21, 2018. Tokyo. After 7 days of preparation, the last remaining ordinary citizens of Tokyo had been evacuated by the Jujutsu world, leaving the city entirely empty. Thanks to Mei's crows, the Jujutsu High didn't need to get close to the interior to see what the city looked like at this very moment. Right in the center of the city, an unfamiliar man stood atop a building with his arms crossed. Even though none of the people present had ever seen him before, except for Yuji and Megumi, the moment his face appeared on the screen, everyone instantly recognized his identity. It's Sukuna. Behind the live broadcast screen, Yuta stared at Sukuna with a solemn expression. To be honest, this was his first time seeing what Sukuna actually looked like. Even though they were separated by a screen, Yuta's heart still raced with an uncontrollable sense of fear, as if the figure standing on the screen weren't a human being at all, but an unspeakable monster. Is such an existence truly something we can defeat? Just a single glance through a screen was enough to strike fear into his heart. The battle between Sukuna and the Jujutsu world caught the attention of not only the higher-ups, but also politicians and financial tycoons from various countries. They were all deeply concerned about what the future would look like if Sukuna actually won. Through Mei's live stream, the current scene in Tokyo was being broadcast in real time to every corner of the world. After half an hour had passed, Renji, who was supposed to appear on the battlefield, was nowhere to be seen. Sukuna's figure only occupied the screen. The audience could even see that Sukuna seemed to be growing a bit impatient. Where is Rinji-san? Didn't he already head to Tokyo? Yuji opened his mouth in complete bewilderment, and a ridiculous thought popped into his mind. Did he run away? It wasn't uncommon for sorcerers to flee. There was Noritoshi Kamo from Jujutsu High, and previously, there was grade 1 sorcerer Mei Mei. The other Jujutsu sorcerer held no real resentment toward those who chose to flee, as everyone made different choices, and they weren't wrong to do so. Yuji's words caused a stir among the crowd. Seeing this, Yuta quickly raised his hand and shouted. Everyone, calm down and let things play out. Renji-san would definitely not run away. Besides, didn't Ishigori-san leave right in front of us alongside him? If he really ran, Ishigori-san would definitely take the field himself. Yuta's words slightly suppressed the unease in everyone's hearts, and they turned their attention back to the live stream. As the minutes dragged on, the sky over Tokyo began to darken. Maki pulled out her phone in confusion, and looked at the weather forecast. Didn't it say it was going to be sunny today? Why does it look like a heavy rainstorm is coming? They could clearly hear the rumbling of thunder echoing within the cloud layers above Tokyo. Inside the room, Yuji watched the heavily layered clouds in the sky, and something suddenly clicked in his mind. Could it be? Just as people began to lower their guard, a sonic cannon zipped down from the sky, striking a building not far from Sukuna. The glass of the building struck by the blast shattered instantly, and the sound of crashing debris echoed from a distance. Instead of looking toward the building, Sukuna tilted his head back, and a savage smirk spread across his face as he stared into the sky. As the king of curses, Ryaman Sukuna could clearly sense an enormous amount of cursed energy hovering right behind those thick layers of dark clouds. You sure took your time, brat. Through the sensation of cursed energy, Sukuna immediately recognized that this came from Renji, the one who slapped him in the face back at the hospital. Though you were originally second on my list of people to kill, it doesn't matter anymore. Who told Satoru Gojo to go and get himself sealed? Sukuna's movements instantly drew the attention of every viewer in the live broadcast room. Following his gaze, everyone realized that there seemed to be something above the clouds. Suddenly, a massive iron canister was thrown down violently from the clouds, aiming straight at Sukuna on the ground. Oh! A display of dominance. It's just an iron canister. Sukuna sneered. To an ordinary sorcerer, a massive iron canister falling from such a height would indeed be highly dangerous and an attack that needed to be dodged. However, Sukuna has a massive ego and would consider it his loss if he even shifted his feet. The appearance of the canister immediately caught everyone's eye in the live stream, and everyone's hearts surged with excitement. Is the battle finally starting? Looking at the canister falling from high above, Yuta's face turned bright red. He instinctively lowered his head, looking as if he couldn't bear to watch whatever was about to happen next. On the battlefield, Sukuna casually waved his hand, and a single slash shot straight toward the iron canister. The sharp slash sliced through the metal canister with absolute ease. However, before Sukuna could even mock Renji's weak attack, his smile froze on his face in the very next instant. The instant the canister split open, a black rain poured down directly from the sky. Relying on his acute sense of smell, Sukuna immediately identified that it wasn't raining up in the sky at all. It was feces. It was literal crap. A rain made entirely of feces poured down right toward Sukuna's head. Sukuna didn't dare to delay for a single second and dodged away to a distance in a flash. He fled frantically onto another building, but before he could even steady his footing, a tremendous roar echoed from the sky. It was a granite blast powerful enough to tear the sky apart. Ishigori launched a sneak attack the exact moment Sukuna was busy dodging the feces. The rushing granite blast crossed the distance between the sky and Sukuna in an instant. The sky along its path was instantly illuminated by the blinding white light of the granite blast. The next moment, the granite blast accurately struck Sukuna, who had just landed. Boom! A deafening explosion rang out. The building Sukuna was standing on was instantly blasted into pieces. A massive explosion erupted where Sukuna stood, and once the smoke cleared, Sukuna's body finally revealed itself. He was covered in a charred, charcoal-like color. Ishigori's single granite blast with maximum output just now actually destroyed one of Sukuna's arms, and a small part of his body directly. In the next second, Renji suddenly appeared right in front of Sukuna, bracing the ground with one hand and raising the other. "Am I late?" Without waiting for Sukuna's answer, Renji stood up on his own accord, extended a finger, and pointed confidently at Sukuna. "By the way, just to avoid any misunderstandings, let me tell you something. You are the challenger here." Chapter 59, The Speed of Lightning. 1111 words. Faced with Renji's verbal attack, Sukuna showed an angry expression. "I'd expect nothing less from you, to actually manage to pull this off. You little brat." Sukuna had been completely played by Renji. It was only after Renji stood right in front of him that Sukuna sensed it. There wasn't just one person above the clouds, and there were 4 more. Meanwhile, up above the gloomy, overcast clouds, Momo Nishimiya let out a sigh of relief. "I finally dropped that wretched iron canister. If I carried it any longer, I would have died." Momo Nishimiya's innate technique is tool manipulation, which allows her to control the wind to a certain extent. The iron canister filled with crap just now was exactly what she dragged up into the sky. She was accompanied at this moment by Ryu Ishigori, Yudahime Iori, and Yoshinobu Gakkiganji. Right as the battle started, Momo carried everyone and flew behind the clouds. Afterward, Yudahime and Gakkiganji began chanting to grant Ishigori a buff, directly boosting his cursed energy output exceeding 200%. Finally, Renji used the iron can of crap to further distract Sukuna while Ishigori released the granite blast exactly at the moment Sukuna landed. After being distracted, Sukuna only abruptly realized what was happening when the granite blast blasted right into his face. Yet despite this, Sukuna's face still showed no expression of pain whatsoever. He fixed his glare tightly on Renji, and the next moment, his body began to writhe frantically. What was even more terrifying was that on the left and right sides of Sukuna's torso, an arm pierced through the skin and burst out. At the same time, another eye grew over Sukuna's right eye, making him look as if he had 2 faces. Not far away, Renji's pupils shrank sharply, and a look of surprise surfaced on his face. "I actually forced out Sukuna's true form with a single hit." Aside from the RCT, Sukuna possessed another method to restore his flesh. That was to transform his incarnated vessel back into his original body from 1,000 years ago. During that process, no matter how severe the injuries on his body were, they could be restored instantly. Originally, Sukuna didn't want to use this ability so early on, but now it seemed he had to do it ahead of schedule. After all, Renji wouldn't just stand by and watch him fully restore his body with the RCT. Since he would have to use it sooner or later, Sukuna might as well use it now. As Sukuna's final piece of flesh finished regenerating, the King of Curses, who dominated the world 1,000 years ago, Ryaman Sukuna, had once again descended upon this world in his true form. The Sukuna presented before Renji's eyes was once again at its peak, and his body was fully recovered. Sukuna sneered as he looked at him. "I am the challenger." As if he just heard something hilarious, Sukuna looked at him with disdain. "You merely landed a lucky sneak attack. Know your place, brat. You're nothing more than an unsightly piece of meat waiting to be butchered. Try to amuse me by squirming a little longer, though in the end, you all taste exactly the same. There is only one fate awaiting you, and that is to be butchered by me." The moment he finished speaking, Sukuna's joints popped sharply. "I'm going to send you flying." Sukuna didn't immediately use his slashing attacks. He knew perfectly well that with the speed Renji had displayed, a normal slashing attack like Dismantle would never hit him. To strike the opponent, the best method was close-quarters combat, followed by unleashing the point-blank slashing attack, Cleave. Sukuna's body shot forward like a missile toward him, and Renji lunged forward to meet him. The instant their fists collided, Sukuna didn't hesitate for a fraction of a second and raised his hand to unleash a dismantle. However, a mere 0.001 seconds before Sukuna's slashing attack could hit him, Renji's figure vanished from the spot. Sukuna, have you ever been kicked at the speed of lightning? The next instant, Renji's familiar voice echoed right beside his ear again. Without Sukuna even being able to track his movements, Renji had somehow appeared directly behind him. After hearing the voice, Sukuna's figure was sent flying through the air, and Renji even teleported behind him yet again midair, kicking him away in another direction. The originally calm expression on Sukuna's face rapidly darkened with each successive blow that sent him flying. In the live broadcast room, everyone watched Sukuna get tossed around like a punching bag and involuntarily opened their mouths in shock. Is this really the king of curses, Ryaman Sukuna? Why is this fight so different from what I imagined? Isn't this a bit too one-sided? On the screen, Renji's silhouette was no longer visible. The only thing anyone could see was a rapidly surging bolt of lightning. The surrounding buildings crumbled into pieces, smashed in all directions by Renji's high-speed movements. At this moment, Renji's confident voice echoed out through the live stream. Sukuna, you're not all that after all. At this rate, I'm afraid I'll end up forgetting you by tomorrow. It seemed as if he had heard Renji's mockery. The exact instant Sukuna hit the ground, a barrage of slashes erupted outward indiscriminately in all directions with him as the center. Renji paused his advance, moved backward rapidly, and pulled away to dodge the slashes. Sukuna wasn't surprised that his attack had missed, or rather, his goal was never to kill him directly in the first place. After Renji's continuous assaults, Sukuna's expression at this moment was darker than the clouds in the sky. Even though Renji's attacks didn't cause any damage to Sukuna, being continuously assaulted by a sorcerer he looked down upon was enough to make the king of curses lose all pride. Sukuna looked at Renji as if he were looking at a dead man. Since regular slashes couldn't catch up to him, I just needed to use a slash that brat couldn't dodge. You brat, the farce ends here. Sukuna didn't want to test him any longer, and he wanted to end this battle. In the next instant, Sukuna placed his palms facing each other, with his middle and ring fingers aligned vertically, and their tips touching to form a triangle. Sukuna's index and pinky fingers bent inward, and his thumbs naturally rested against each other near his bent index fingers. Inside the live broadcast room, everyone's expressions changed drastically as the sign Sukuna made was the Enmitten sign. Sukuna was about to use a domain expansion. Chapter 60, The Shrine and the Storm. 1212 words. Domain expansion was the strongest technique a sorcerer could deploy after fully understanding their innate technique. When facing a sorcerer who didn't possess a domain, the advantage of a domain expansion was immense. The very moment Sukuna began preparing to unleash his domain, a small straw doll dropped onto one of Sukuna's fingers that was already prepared in advance. In the next instant, Yuta raised a hammer and an iron nail high into the air, driving the nail ruthlessly into the body of the straw doll. Straw doll technique, resonance. Before the battle had even begun, Renji discussed the timing for using the straw doll technique with Yuta. Just like cursed speech, the straw doll technique produced varying degrees of backlash depending on the strength of the target. To prevent Yuta from suffering too severe a backlash when targeting Sukuna, Renji requested that Yuta only use the technique to interfere at critical moments. This was why Yuta didn't use the technique to interfere with Sukuna at the start of the fight. But now, the critical moment has arrived. As the iron nail in Yuta's hand slammed fiercely into the straw doll's body, several black spikes resembling iron nails instantly erupted from the body of Sukuna, who was in the middle of expanding his domain expansion. A mouthful of blood sprayed from Sukuna's mouth. The straw doll technique. Through his memories from his time inside Yuji Itadori's body, Sukuna instantly recognized it. This was the curse technique of Nobara Kujisaki, Itadori's classmate from Jujutsu High, the straw doll technique. However, what puzzled Sukuna was that the power behind this specific resonance seemed a bit too strong, and didn't feel like a level Kujisaki could achieve. The moment the spikes erupted, Yuta, who hid behind the screen, felt as if he had been hit by a catastrophic blow, coughing up a mouthful of blood as well. Naturally, Renji wouldn't let this moment of Sukuna's hesitation slip away on the battlefield. The lightning-cursed energy continued to circulate inside his body, and his speed accelerated to the absolute output in an instant, sending him charging straight towards Sukuna like a cannonball. The lightning-attributed cursed energy continued to surge within his body and accelerated to the maximum output in an instant, launching him straight at Sukuna like a cannonball. The exact instant the collision occurred, Sukuna was sent flying once again, his body dragging a long scratch across the ground. However, just when everyone thought Sukuna's domain expansion was interrupted, a bloodthirsty, icy aura still expanded rapidly through the surroundings. Domain expansion, malevolent shrine. Behind the live broadcast screen, Yuji pounded his own thigh anxiously. Damn it. Even after all that, it still didn't work. He didn't expect that even under these circumstances, they still failed to interrupt Sukuna from expanding his domain. There was truly nothing they could do about it. Even though Sukuna looked somewhat disheveled, he hadn't suffered any real injuries since reclaiming his true form. Given Yuta's reserves of cursed energy, the probability of knocking Sukuna out cold using only the straw doll technique was incredibly low. They stared anxiously at the live stream. They all knew perfectly well that Renji still failed to learn simple domain up to this point. No matter how fast Renji's speed was, he couldn't escape the guaranteed kill effect within the domain. Amidst the rubble, Sukuna pushed away the debris on top of him, and stood up from within with a cold gaze. Brat, the farce is over. I am still the world's strongest sorcerer. To Sukuna, he already won the moment he successfully expanded his domain. Renji's terrifying speed would no longer be an issue because the slashes would hit him no matter how fast he was from the domain's guaranteed hit. The only thing that puzzled Sukuna was why, in the face of his domain, Renji neither expanded his own domain nor used defensive measures like simple domain. Looking at Sukuna's expanded domain, there was no regret or fear in Renji's eyes. This was a scenario he anticipated long ago. He might have been able to run out of Malevolent Shrine's effective range before Sukuna fully deployed it with his speed, but fighting that way would be endless. He couldn't keep running forever, and there's a chance Sukuna might ignore him to hunt down the rest of Jujutsu High. Renji clenched his fist tightly and shouted with a grin. Then prove it to me, Sukuna. Innate technique release, mythical beast amber. Sukuna's gaze narrowed. The last time Renji had unleashed his technique, Sukuna had already been separated from Yuji's body. However, in the next fraction of a second, Sukuna activated his domain's effect. A massive attack of the cursed technique, Cleave, rained down upon Renji. Normally, Sukuna needed to touch his enemy to use Cleave, but inside his domain, he could completely bypass the requirement of physical contact. No one could see the trajectory of the swinging slashes, a dense, grid-like pattern of slash marks appeared across Renji's body. Renji's body was torn apart in a split second, turning directly into squares that looked just like diced mango pieces. Renji-san. The pupils of Yuji and the others watching shrank sharply. They stared in horror at the sight of Renji being chopped to pieces. Just when everyone thought the farce was truly coming to an end, a smile actually tugged at the corner of the mouth on Renji's face. In the next moment, a massive amount of electrical currents erupted from the severed chunks of his body, and the pieces began to rapidly expand and grow larger. The body that was originally made of flesh and blood transformed directly into surges of expanding lightning. The volume of the lightning continued to expand, and a moment later, a colossal beast composed entirely of pure electricity crashed into everyone's view. Yuji and Megumi stared with wide eyes at Renji's transformation. Thanks to Mei's crows, Renji's technique release was displayed with absolute clarity. An innate technique where the physical body turns directly into electricity was something they never even heard of. Having transformed into a colossal beast, Renji roared and swung his arm out, clawing straight towards Sukuna. I will absolutely not fall. I will stand up and I will fight again. Faced with the attack rushing toward him, Sukuna's gaze narrowed, and he unleashed his slashes once more. Just as he expected, his slashes indeed struck the arm Renji swung at him. Renji's arm was cut directly into several pieces. However, the arm that had been cut into pieces didn't stop because of it. The moment the arm split apart, a massive surge of electrical currents instantly bound the severed pieces back together. It was exactly like slashing a blade through water. The water would indeed split into two due to the attack, but the moment the slash ended, the water would simply flow back and gather together once again. Since Renji already released his technique, his body transformed to a certain extent into an elemental life form composed of electricity. As long as his cursed energy was not completely depleted, Renji wouldn't truly die, and could still use reverse cursed technique. In other words, at this moment, he was immune to physical damage to a certain degree. Chapter 61, A Perfect Symphony. 1145 words. Take this, Sukuna. Renji's lightning-transformed hand slammed violently into Sukuna. With his arms crossed in front of his chest to block, Sukuna was blasted, flying through the air. Relying on his combat experience as the king of curses, Sukuna figured out the mechanics of Renji's technique release in just a single glance. By imposing a binding vow, Renji sacrificed his own physical flesh as a price to manifest any phenomena that can be created by electricity. In this state, he was nearly immune to all physical strikes. Most importantly, Sukuna's slashing techniques dealt almost zero damage to him. Sukuna's expression involuntarily grew solemn. The viewers all widened their eyes in excitement. Yuta looked at the screen with even admiration. Is this what Renji-san meant by his method for dealing with the slashes? That's absolutely incredible. They held their breath and stared tightly at the screen. Sukuna was caught in the greatest crisis he had ever faced in his entire life. Renji's electricity enveloped the entire battlefield. A massive amount of lightning bolted uncontrollably from his body, striking indiscriminately at the surrounding buildings. They finally understood why Renji had said he wasn't suited for team fights. Bang! 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 Renji's fists covered in cursed energy continuously attacked Sukuna, and large areas of Sukuna's skin began to char black. It wasn't just Renji's attacks. At the edge of the battlefield, blasts of cursed energy flew through the air like beams of light, striking Sukuna with accuracy. This was Ryu Ishigori's attack. Ishigori didn't retreat with Momo Nishimiya and the others. Instead, he landed on top of a building several hundred meters away, closely monitoring the battlefield. As Renji's previous speed was too fast as he clashed hand-to-hand with Sukuna, Ishigori risked accidentally hitting Renji if he launched a reckless attack. Therefore, Ishigori held back his granite blast, patiently waiting for the perfect window of opportunity. Now that Renji had unleashed his technique release, that perfect opening had finally arrived. Even though Renji's current form was much larger now, his speed also slowed down. While the pure electricity transformation granted him a body immune to physical attacks, it simultaneously stripped away his ability to stimulate his muscles with electricity for burst speed. Even though Renji's body remained very agile, he could no longer achieve the lightning-fast movements of his human form. Relying on his precise control over cursed energy, Ishigori could finally ensure that his granite blast only hit Sukuna without striking Renji. At the top of the distant building, Ishigori fired his granite blast recklessly, laughing out loud at the same time. Ha ha ha. Too weak, way too weak. Is this really Sukuna? He's nothing special after all. Ishigori's cursed energy blast and Renji's lightning beast, Sukuna ran miserably across the battlefield. The fresh wounds opened across his body one after another, but he couldn't muster any decent counterattack. The scales of victory seemed to tip toward Renji. In this desperate situation, Sukuna desperately racked his brain as he searched for a way to win. Thanks to his RCT, the dense lightning strikes and granite blast couldn't kill Sukuna instantly. Seeing that he couldn't put an end to the battle even after all this time, Renji finally lost his patience. He knew well the danger of letting a fight drag out. After pausing his attacks, Renji pulled back to create some distance and roared toward the sky. Ishigori, hold Sukuna down for 3 seconds. The next moment, a massive amount of blue light began to erupt from Renji's body. Ryu Ishigori didn't show the slightest bit of fear, and laughed out loud. Ha ha ha. Leave it to me. Immediately, even more granite blasts fired from his pompadour-shaped head, aimed directly at Sukuna in the center of the battlefield. After Renji stopped his assault, the pressure on Sukuna dropped significantly, but his mind didn't relax for a second. He knew that Renji didn't stop out of exhaustion, but was clearly preparing an ultimate move. Sukuna wanted to stop him, but the relentless bombardment from Ishigori's blast didn't give him a chance to break away from the battlefield. Since Ishigori was a few hundred meters away, and the range of Sukuna's malevolent shrine was only 200 meters, he couldn't unleash his slashes on him at all. Seeing Renji's body light up once more, Yuji and Megumi instantly realized what he was about to do. Look! That's the sonic cannon Renji-san used to kill Maharaga. Yuji's shout of anticipation echoed in the ears of everyone present. They widened their eyes with fear to miss the next scene. They all knew how terrifying Maharaga was. After 3 seconds, Renji's sonic cannon was fully charged, and an immense amount of cursed energy gathered in his mouth through his body. He opened his mouth wide toward Sukuna's direction, and the sonic cannon was ready to fire. Sukuna's expression changed. The cursed energy in Kaijin's mouth was unbelievably massive. I don't know what will happen to me if I take this blast head-on. In the next split second, Sukuna abandoned his slashing techniques. He clapped his hands together, and a stream of blood shot rapidly from his fingertips. It was blood manipulation, piercing blood. With a swing of Sukuna's arm, the trajectory of the piercing blood drew a perfect arc through the air. Ishigori's incoming granite blasts were all precisely intercepted and cut down mid-air by Sukuna. In this split second, there were no longer any attacks obstructing his movements. The opportunity for Sukuna to escape the blast radius seemed to be right before his eyes. But right at that moment Yuta, who stayed outside the live broadcast room, made his move. Don't even think about running, Sukuna. Straw doll technique, resonance. Yuta precisely seized the gap where Sukuna attempted to dodge, activating the straw doll technique once more. A lot of black spikes erupted from within Sukuna, causing his body to uncontrollably stiffen in place. If it were just a split-second delay, it might not have been fatal. However, right in front of Sukuna, Renji's sonic cannon already fired. The violent sonic cannon tore through the distance between him and Sukuna in a flash, blasting accurately into Sukuna's body. Sukuna knew he no longer had the ability to stop the sonic cannon from hitting him. The endless sonic cannon lit up a dazzling white light across Tokyo. In the 3 seconds leading up to the blast, Ishigori and Yuta had countered Sukuna's counters perfectly. After the sonic attack subsided, a long deep trench was instantly plowed into the concrete ground. Sukuna's figure was completely pierced through by the sonic cannon, and not a single trace of him could be seen anymore. Yuji looked at everything on the screen in disbelief. Does that mean? That's right. Yuta shouted in sheer excitement, Renji-san hit him. He won. No. Suddenly, Kyuzukabe sounded with a murmur. Chapter 62, Indomitable. 1,369 words. The violent sonic cannon pierced through the whole of Shinjuku. After finishing the attack, Renji bent his body slightly, looking visibly exhausted. They stared at the screen, praying in their hearts for Sukuna's defeat. However, the scene people imagined, of Sukuna heavily wounded and collapsing to the ground, didn't appear. No. It wasn't that there was absolutely nothing. In Sukuna's original position, a carbonized, shrunken arm remained. Did Sukuna's body completely carbonize and vanish under the scorching heat of the attack? That's impossible. How could there still be a single arm? Just as people were wondering what on earth had happened, a few keenly noticed that the environment of the battlefield seemed a bit different. Renji, who stood in the center of the battlefield, was the very first person to notice the problem. He suddenly realized that the temperature of the surrounding air rose rapidly. The light before his eyes was even more distorted because of the rising temperature. In the next instant, Renji suddenly discovered that the dust particles kicked up in the air from the collapsing buildings seemed to have caught fire. A massive surge of cursed energy rose from the ruins in a corner. Along with the collapse of the debris, Sukuna appeared once more. At this moment, among Sukuna's 4 arms, one was already severed. The other 2 intact arms were positioned carefully, with one pointed at Renji, while the other pulled back, striking the pose of drawing a bow and arrow composed of pure fire aimed dead center at Renji's figure. How can Sukuna be over in that position? Yuta shouted in disbelief. He clearly used the straw doll curse technique to immobilize Sukuna. Yet looking at Sukuna's body, Renji's sonic cannon failed to hit him at all. Even though he didn't know what had happened, the moment Yuta saw Sukuna's posture, he knew he had to interrupt him again. Without a single shred of hesitation, Yuta raised the hammer in his hand high into the air once more. Straw doll curse technique, resonance. However, something that shocked everyone occurred. Yuta's straw doll curse technique seemed to take effect, but it took effect in the wrong place. With a flash of bright light, Sukuna's hand severed directly at the forearm and flew into the air. The spikes that were supposed to appear on Sukuna's body all manifested on that arm into the air instead. A smirk curled on the corner of Sukuna's mouth, as if he were mocking someone through the screen. A cold sweat instantly poured down Yuta's face. It's a binding vow. Sukuna used a binding vow. He used one of his own arms to transfer all of the paralysis and damage of the straw doll technique onto that single arm. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. Sukuna had been thinking about how to evade it ever since he was hit by the straw doll curse technique the first time. When Yuta used the straw doll curse technique for the second time, Sukuna deliberately pretended to get hit, leading Renji to mistakenly believe he was immobilized by Yuta. Afterward, Sukuna took advantage of the white light generated when Renji released his sonic cannon to sneak into a ruin and hide. Moreover, the piercing blood earlier wasn't the blood manipulation. He's mimicking the mechanism. He's using the raw output to compress his cursed energy to a molecular point and firing it like a railgun. He doesn't need the blood-inherited trait, his control over jujitsu is just that perfect. Furthermore, Sukuna's technique possessed 2 different forms of manifestation, and Fuga was the second one. Fuga was a technique that possessed a firepower of these flames far exceeding Jogo's, but its drawback was also severe, with its speed and attack range being minuscule. To evade these drawbacks, Sukuna applied a binding vow, allowing Fuga to expand through his domain expansion. The dust particles chopped up by the slashes of malevolent shrine could be infused with an explosive cursed energy similar to Fuga. When the amount of these dust particles was large enough, a chain explosion would occur, releasing with firepower that far exceeded limits. In Shibuya, Sukuna used this exact move to kill Maharaga. Normally, this move wasn't that dangerous because its startup time was far too long. Under normal circumstances, Renji had the ability to dodge or even directly interrupt it. But the problem now was that during the gap when Renji released his sonic cannon, Sukuna had hidden himself. Not only did he complete the advanced charging for Fuga, but he also scattered the dust particles infused with Fuga across the entire battlefield. Sukuna looked at him with a cold sneer. The slashes are ineffective against you, and how about this explosion? In the distance, Ishigori grew extremely anxious, and he fired his cursed energy cannons, as if they cost nothing in an attempt to interrupt Sukuna's Fuga. However, it was still too late. The fire arrow shot explosively from Sukuna's fingertips, targeting Renji directly. Renji's massive frame made it entirely impossible for him to dodge in time, and the exact instant the flame struck him, the arrow of fire erupted with a roar. The flames reacted violently with the dust particles infused with Fuga, progressing further from a burn into a massive explosion. A shockwave of several thousand degrees swept across the entire Tokyo battlefield in an instant, and the flames from Sukuna directly devoured every single existence within sight. Outside the live broadcast room, the people from Jujutsu High all stood up anxiously. They knew Renji's body characteristics. The explosive damage generated by fire could reduce his physical form to the greatest extent. The soaring flames caused by the explosion completely blocked the vision of Meimei's crows, and nothing except firelight could be seen on the screen. After a dozen seconds, the fire slowly receded, and within a cloud of smoke and dust, Rinji's figure appeared in people's sight once more. At this moment, Rinji's condition looked terrible, with his body becoming shattered and torn apart, and his head also slumped down in exhaustion, as if he were about to collapse at any moment. After seeing this, Yuta immediately stood up and shouted anxiously at Hikari Kinji. "Hikari. Rinji-san is about to collapse, go and support him right now." Hikari Kinji nodded without hesitation, and was about to rush out. However, Shoko Yeri, among the crowd, suddenly spoke up. "Wait. Something seems to be happening with him." They looked back at the screen, only to see Rinji, who had his head hung low, suddenly swaying. Suddenly, Rinji's thoughts flashed wildly through his mind. So this is what exhaustion feels like. Is my challenge going to end here too? Am I going to die at this stage? Rinji felt incredibly tired. He had walked this path step by step, carrying the expectations of Yuji and the others, and sometimes he really wanted to just end it all. Moreover, he already accumulated more than enough from this challenge. He not only defeated Hajime Kashimo, but he also defeated Maharaga. Even if I keep fighting, I might not necessarily win. Why waste time here? As long as this challenge ends, I can immediately obtain a massive amount of rewards. After this, I will be able to defeat this monster, right? Rinji asked himself. No. I still have Sukuna to deal with, and I still have a mission to complete. Sukuna had only expanded his domain expansion once, and more than half of his cursed energy still remained. If I fall here, Okatsukuin will definitely be left helpless without support, and the Jujutsu world will be destroyed by Sukuna. Itadori needs me, Okatsu needs me, and this world needs me. I will. Absolutely cannot fall. I will stand up, I will fight again. Rinji's head snapped high up, and a roar that seemed to come from hell erupted from his mouth. In the next instant, a massive amount of cursed energy flows into his body, which had been damaged by Fuga, and rapidly repairs itself. In a matter of mere seconds, Rinji, who was originally on the brink of death, stood once again completely intact right in front of Sukuna. Sukuna, let's fight again. Chapter 63, Self-Imposed Binding Vows. 1,250 words. He is invincible. The Jujutsu High let out a thunderous cheer. No one expected Rinji to stand up once again, and even Sukuna, in the center of the battlefield, looked at him with a serious expression at this moment. Originally, Sukuna thought that he was dead, but now, it seemed like something was wrong. Right now, the battlefield was covered in dense, dark clouds, with lightning continuously cracking down from the sky. Damn it. The reason this bastard arrived so late was to prepare the thunderstorm clouds in the sky. Is this even possible? Sukuna is a master of reading cursed energy flow, but because Rinji was far away preparing a meteorological phenomenon rather than charging up a direct attack, Sukuna couldn't sense the incoming threat until the sky literally turned black. Suddenly, Rinji's reckless laughter echoed across the battlefield. Sukuna kept a gloomy face and ignored Rinji's laughter. He continuously leaped back and forth between the buildings, focusing entirely on dodging the attacks from Rinji. Far from the battlefield, Ishigori also continued to use his cannon-shaped head to fire a granite blast, bombarding Sukuna non-stop. Ha ha ha. This is exactly the kind of battle I wanted. The two of us are simply too strong. The scales of victory had already begun to tilt in Rinji's direction. The final formula for victory seemed to be fully prepared. Sukuna's life was already like a candle flickering in the wind. Bang! After another blast came from Ishigori's granite blast, it accurately shattered the spot where Sukuna landed. Sukuna, who stepped into empty air, slid straight down from midair. Rinji seized the opportunity to press down upon him, and his giant fist, wrapped in cursed energy, slammed fiercely from the air toward Sukuna. You really look pathetic, Sukuna. Suddenly, a somewhat frantic voice reached everyone's ears. The next moment, a figure with flying wings growing on her back flew at high speed from the edge of the battlefield. She abruptly stopped and dashed in midair, constantly shifting directions, flawlessly evading the electricity that Renji's body unconsciously emitted. In just the blink of an eye, the opponent's figure arrived directly in front of Sukuna. Just 0.2 before Renji's fist could hit Sukuna, a black, hemispherical thin membrane blocked the path of his fist. The other end of the membrane plugged into the ground. The instant Renji's fist slammed into it, the cursed energy electricity attribute wrapped around it was channeled straight down into the ground. Outside the live broadcast room, Megumi suddenly bolted upright. He stared at the screen in panic and shouted, "Sumiki-chan." That's right. The person who suddenly joined the battlefield was none other than Megumi Fushiguro's older sister, Sumiki Fushiguro, who saw Sukuna through the live broadcast. Sumiki Fushiguro was just the name of the vessel, and her current name should be the ancient sorcerer, Yorozu. Sukuna didn't show the slightest hint of gratitude on his face after being helped. He scanned the hemispherical membrane that Yorozu used to block the attack, and instantly recognized it as construction technique. After hearing that familiar voice, Sukuna immediately recognized her. "It's you, Yorozu." Renji didn't have the habit of watching people catch up on old times. The very moment his attack was blocked by Yorozu, a new attack was unleashed. Then, the two of them pulled back to create distance. Yorozu looked at Renji with a furious expression and screamed, "You bastard, can't you see I'm talking to Sukuna?" Renji ignored her, and a sonic cannon blasted toward her once again. Yorozu didn't show any panic on her face, and a black membrane appeared before her once more and blocked the attack. After watching his attack being grounded into the ground by the membrane, Renji's heart sank. Is she using metal to conduct the electricity? Yorozu's construction technique could manipulate metal. The black membrane in front of her was actually a special liquid metal. By utilizing the principle that metal conducts electricity, she directly redirected the most lethal electrical currents from Renji's attack straight into the ground. "I'll help you." In the distance, Ishigori's roar arrived almost simultaneously with his granite blast. The granite blast smashed directly through Yorozu's metal barrier. After another attack from an outsider, Yorozu was even more furious with her figure began to repeatedly dodge and jump through the battlefield. On one hand, Yorozu needed to use her construction technique to block Renji's attacks, and on the other hand, she had to watch out for the sneak attacks from Ishigori's granite blast outside the battlefield. To the side, Sukuna, who was also dodging attacks, suddenly raised his head to glance at the cloud layer in the sky, and then at Yorozu beside him. Suddenly, a smile curled up at the corner of Sukuna's mouth. He made a hand sign, and the next moment, malevolent shrine that was originally constructed in the center of the battlefield, shattered and deactivated directly. Outside the live broadcast room, Yuta and the others immediately furrowed their brows. Why did Sukuna deactivate his domain? Without the slashes of a domain, how is he going to block the attacks? Even though his slashing attacks didn't work well against Ishigori's cursed granite blast or Renji's sonic cannon, they could still barely serve as a shield in critical moments. Now that Sukuna had actively deactivated his domain, he would fall straight into a cursed technique burnout, rendering him temporarily unable to use his techniques. However, in the very next moment, they realized what Sukuna was planning. Sukuna looked gently at Yorozu. "Yorozu. Huh. What is it?" Yorozu looked at Sukuna, flustered and caught off guard. Sukuna had never spoken to her in such a tone before. "Thank you for always thinking of me, and thank you for always loving me. In that case, please help me this once." Sukuna's gentle voice drifted from his mouth, and Yorozu's ears were filled with nothing but his words. "I want to win this battle, and after that, I won't need anything else. My future, my soul, my body, I pledge them to you. From now on, we can truly be together forever. I love you, Yorozu." The air on the battlefield turned quiet for a split second, and the originally furious Yorozu instantly became ecstatic. They could see how overjoyed Yorozu was as she screamed loudly toward the sky. "Sukuna! Sukuna. Sukuna. I like you the most, 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 most. In her state of ecstasy, Yorozu didn't hesitate. A dark, binding brand manifested across her chest, a self-imposed binding vow. To protect the man who finally accepted her love, trading her future survival for power. A boundless cursed energy erupted from within Yorozu's body. The massive amount of cursed energy even pushed away Rinji's lightning, forming a vacuum zone around the area. On the other hand, Rinji looked at Sukuna in utter disbelief. Sukuna. To think you'd resort to this trick. Sukuna smiled as he looked back at him. How rude, but this is true love. He just stood behind her, smiling coldly. He didn't have to sacrifice a thing, just fed her a lie, knowing her own fanaticism would make her sacrifice herself to protect him. A binding vow initialized by that woman. Yuta shouted from the room. She's making a vow with her own life. If I fail to protect the man who loves me, my technique will destroy me instantly. She's using the ultimate penalty of death to artificially spike her liquid metal output to infinite levels. Chapter 64, Chapter 64, The Shattered Sky. 1,320 words. In that case, I am the great righteous cause. Renji's roar echoed from the battlefield into the ears of everyone watching the live broadcast. Yuta Okatsu stared intently at the screen, the hammer in his hand ready at a moment's notice. Even though Sukuna had already found a way to bypass his straw doll technique, hammering it away would still drain some of Sukuna's cursed energy. However, for some reason, as he watched Rinji yell at Sukuna on the screen, he felt a sense of déjà vu. Why does this feel so familiar? Out of the corner of his eye, Yuta suddenly noticed Maki, Inumaki, and Panda looking at him with strange expressions. Huh? Yuta looked around, completely bewildered. What are you all looking at me for? Look at the screen. Right. Look at the screen, look at the screen. Panda coughed lightly and quickly gestured for Maki to put her attention back on the battle. Renji's entire body began to glow with blue light once again. This was the prelude to releasing the sonic cannon. Since Sukuna's domain already dissolved anyway, he didn't need to worry about Sukuna blasting him with Fuga. Right now, Sukuna was stuck in a cursed technique burnout, and couldn't use his techniques. Yorozu arrived at Sukuna's side at that exact moment. Sukuna pointed toward the thunderstorm clouds in the sky and shouted. Yorozu, take me into the sky. Without asking for a reason, Yorozu grabbed Sukuna into a tight embrace, and the translucent wings on her back fluttered frantically. After watching Sukuna charge straight toward the sky, Rinji immediately realized what he was planning to do. He wanted to fly above the cloud layer and directly blow apart the thunderstorm clouds Rinji had gathered, heating the air currents to force the rapid formation of massive clouds. Even though Rinji was currently charging his sonic cannon and couldn't speak to warn the others, such an obvious move required no words to communicate. Ryu Ishigori saw right through Sukuna's plan at a single glance. Hey. I can't just act like I don't see you too. Ishigori laughed out loud, and the granite blast on his head fired even faster. Since they were high up in the sky, Ishigori didn't have to worry at all about accidentally hitting Rinji, making his granite blasts even more reckless. Whoosh! Whoosh! Yorozu roared furiously at Ishigori. You bastard! Don't you dare ruin my date with Sukuna. After holding Sukuna tight, Yorozu constantly changed directions in midair, dodging Ishigori's attacks back and forth. Sukuna looked down coldly at Ishigori on the ground. This brat. Ishigori's granite blast had annoyed Sukuna quite a bit just moments ago. It was only because he had been tangled up with Rinji that he didn't have the time to deal with him. Yorozu carried Sukuna as she darted back and forth through midair, tracing a trail across the sky like a shooting star. Standing on top of a building, Ishigori constantly adjusted the angle of his cannon-shaped hair, trying to hit Yorozu in the sky. But because Yorozu was in the air, and the distance was too far, Ishigori's blast consistently missed her. Sukuna didn't let his guard down for a single second. He kept his eyes fixed on Rinji, who was rapidly shrinking in size below them. He knew that Ishigori's blast was just an appetizer, and the true main course was about to arrive. Yorozu, faster. Leave it to me. The vibration frequency of Yorozu's wings accelerated once more, pushing her speed to another level. The wild wind howled in their ears, and the buildings on the ground turned into blurry little dots. However, right at that moment, Renji's sonic cannon was finally complete. A piercing blue beam of light erupted from Renji's mouth, rushing straight toward the sky with a momentum that could destroy heaven. It's here. Sukuna's pupils shrank. Yorozu also sensed the danger. She held Sukuna and violently flipped to the right, and the breath blasted right past their left side. Even without a direct hit, the residual aura tearing off the sonic cannon caused Yorozu's heart to skip a beat. However, Renji's attack didn't stop there. He rapidly swung his head, and the sonic cannon in his mouth began to sweep across the sky in circular motions, moving just like Novelette. Yorozu frantically changed directions in the air, while sonic cannon followed closely behind, constantly chasing the positions they just left. Outside the live broadcast room, everyone held their breath, praying that Renji's attack would hit Yorozu. To everyone's despair, however, Yorozu's airborne maneuverability was terrifyingly high. Every single time the sonic cannon was on the verge of making contact, Yorozu always managed to evade at the last second. The speed of the sonic cannon began to slow down, and the beam gradually grew thin and weak. It's no good. Yuta said, gritting his teeth. Renji-san's curse energy is reaching its limit. Sure enough, after pursuing them for a few more seconds, Renji's sonic cannon was completely depleted. Yorozu hovered in midair, holding Sukuna, panting heavily. Ha ha, that was close. She looked down at Sukuna in her arms, her eyes overflowing with affection. Sukuna, I did it. The corner of Sukuna's mouth curled up slightly. You did well, Yorozu. Leave the rest to me. By that time, Yorozu and Sukuna had already arrived above the clouds. He looked down at the lower patch of thunderstorm clouds, and the smile on the corner of his mouth grew wider and wider. A pity, the farce ends right here. Sukuna clasped his hands together in front of his chest, forming the hand sign for his domain expansion once again. During the flight just now, Sukuna's curse technique burnout already ended. Domain expansion, malevolent shrine. The purpose of Sukuna's domain expansion wasn't to kill an enemy this time, but to completely destroy the thunderstorm cloud beneath his feet. Since the live broadcast of the battlefield was transmitted through Mei's crows, and Sukuna already flew above the clouds at that moment, Mei's crows couldn't fly that high. For the time being, they couldn't see what Sukuna was doing at all. Yuta immediately raised his hammer, intending to do something with the straw doll technique. However, aside from sensing the cursed energy within his body being rapidly drained, nothing happened. The next moment, a new image came through the crows. A sharp-eyed jujitsu sorcerer looked at the structure emerging from the clouds and shouted in disbelief. How did Sukuna expand his domain so fast? Didn't his last one just end? No one knew how Sukuna had recovered from his curse technique burnout so rapidly, but the reality was that he had done it. On the ground of the battlefield, Renji looked up at the malevolent shrine that appeared in the sky. He could faintly sense that the thunderstorm clouds in the sky were being cut apart by a massive number of slashes. The cloud layers he built up seemed to begin to undergo a change in property. The moisture and dust particles inside the clouds were all injected with explosive cursed energy. Suddenly, a flicker of firelight broke through the cloud layer. Renji let out a helpless sigh. Now, the clouds that were applied with Fuga began to explode, and Renji knew that he no longer had any chance to stop the fire. In a matter of mere seconds, the thunderstorm clouds Renji had spent hours preparing were completely blown away by Sukuna's Fuga. The sunlight broke through the sky once again, cascading down onto the scarred and devastated land of Tokyo. Even though it was warm sunlight, it made the people in the live broadcast room feel freezing cold. Afterward, Renji's body would rapidly exhaust itself in battle. Yuji looked at the scene in despair. Does that mean? That's right. Yorozu said ecstatically, Sukuna is going to win. Chapter 65, The Artificial Tyrant. 1,320 words. In the sky, Sukuna's figure descended rapidly. Bang! A moment later, a loud crash echoed as Sukuna slammed hard onto the ground. How about it, brat? Sukuna raised his head and looked with great interest at Renji, who still maintained his amber beast form. How much longer can you hold out? Jujutsu followed the laws of physics too, and everything here required an equivalent exchange. A powerful jujutsu technique almost always came with a certain amount of risk. Renji's technique release, much like Kashimo Hajime's mythical beast Amber, belonged to the rare category of life-for-a-life technique. They discarded their physical bodies at the cost of nearly losing their lives in exchange for a brief period of invincibility. This state was certainly not permanent, and under normal circumstances, it could only last for a short period of time. In fact, Renji would have collapsed long ago if it weren't for his cursed energy reserves. If he hadn't been utilizing the natural electricity down from the sky, Renji actually wouldn't have lasted this long. He was essentially plugging himself into an external power grid. Sukuna saw through this exact point, which was why he risked everything to destroy the thunderstorm clouds in the sky. Within this period of time, Sukuna had more than enough time to drain the residual cursed energy inside Renji's body. Outside the live broadcast room, Yuta stood up in a panic and shouted, Hikari! Maki! The two waved their hands and in the next instant, they vanished from the spot. Without spending even a single moment worrying about Renji being at a disadvantage, the ones who immediately rushed to the battlefield were Hikari Kinji, a grade 1 jujutsu sorcerer capable of rivaling Gojo Satoru in the future, and Zenin Maki, the current heavenly restriction user. In the live broadcast, everyone could see that Renji's current state was not good. He just released a blast of sonic cannon not long ago, which drained almost all of his cursed energy. Now, Renji's remaining cursed energy would soon fail to sustain his technique. Yorozu slowly descended from the sky, landing behind Sukuna. Darling, do you want me to help you finish him off? No need. Sukuna raised a hand, let him burn himself out. He looked over Renji's gradually collapsing body with great interest. How pathetic. Sukuna laughed softly, and here I thought you could give me more surprises. I'm afraid I'll forget about you very soon. A massive crack began to appear across Renji's body, and he began to lose his stability. Renji stumbled, nearly collapsing to the ground. He could feel his consciousness fading. Given his current level of cursed energy, it was still technically enough to pull off curse technique reversal to forcefully repair his brain and vital organs. However, Sukuna was still standing right in front of him, and he wouldn't just sit back and watch him escape. Is it really going to end like this? Right then, an idea suddenly flashed through Renji's mind. It was an idea that had randomly occurred to him, while he was recovering at Jujutsu High after defeating Maharaga. Sukuna's brow suddenly furrowed. He felt Renji's massive lightning body collapsing rapidly. Even though collapsing was normal, it should not break down this fast. The next moment, Sukuna realized something was wrong. While Renji's body was disintegrating, a completely fresh life force began to emerge from deep within him. Renji's body began to shrink at high speed, with countless arcs of electricity peeled off the surface of his body, turning into flecks of starlight and dissipating into the air. The originally massive beast collapsed, and after a few seconds, it condensed directly into a blue orb. Outside the live broadcast room, everyone widened their eyes. What is that? Yuta looked anxiously at Yuji. Itadori, didn't you see Renji-san use his technique release before? Did he turn into a ball last time too? And no. Yuji immediately countered. He remembered very clearly that the last time Renji used his technique release to defeat Maharaga, his body had gone straight into a critically injured and bedridden state after the technique collapsed. This was the first time he saw this orb too. Just as people were wondering what was happening, the orb began to shatter. One crack after another appeared on the orb, and a moment later, the entire object burst open. As the orb exploded, a human figure emerged in the frame. It was hard to describe, but it was a human body so perfect it was almost dreamlike. Renji's muscles were full and firm, the abdominal muscles were sharply defined, and the V-line cut deeply into his waist. For the first time, Sukuna's expression became truly solemn. Even though the appearance changed a bit, he recognized at a single glance that the man in front of him was the exact same Renji who had fought him for so long just now. What made Sukuna even more vigilant was that the original Renji possessed cursed energy that could rival his own original form. Yet, on this person's body, Sukuna slightly detected a small trace of cursed energy at all. He seemed just like an ordinary person with a small amount of cursed energy, possessing nothing special except for his well-developed muscles. Yet, from such an ordinary person, Sukuna bizarrely felt an unusual amount of pressure. Looking at Renji, Sukuna felt as if he looked at an ancient, vicious beast. "You brat." Sukuna said in a deep voice, "What did you do?" Renji stretched and moved his brand new body. He looked down at his hands, and it was no longer an illusory body made of lightning, but a physical body of flesh and blood. "It's a binding vow." "What?" Sukuna roared in disbelief. "I used a binding vow. Renji explained without hiding anything. "I locked away my technique, and all the cursed energy inside me. In exchange, I gained a more powerful physical body. It's not exactly heavenly restriction, because I still have a bit of cursed energy for the binding vow to function." The price of the binding vow was massive. From now on, Renji could no longer immunize himself to become immune to Sukuna's slashes, and his originally massive pool of cursed energy remains locked in place. However, Renji directly obtained a perfect body that could rival or even surpass the heavenly restriction. The only downside was that he could never be a true ghost like Toji or Maki. He could feel that every single muscle and every single bone was as hard as steel. Furthermore, alongside his explanation, Renji triggered the revealing one's buff. He felt the power inside his body surge to an even higher level. He smiled at Sukuna, and his figure vanished from the spot instantly. It was not the acceleration from lightning stimulating his flesh like before, but pure physical explosion. Sukuna didn't even have time to shrink his pupils, and he subconsciously wanted to make a defensive move. But before he could even raise his hands, Renji's voice came from right behind him and Yorozu. "Sorry, excuse me, just passing through." Renji's tone was humble and polite with flawless. But the exact moment the voice arrived, a dense barrage of striking sounds exploded across Sukuna and Yorozu's bodies. Bang! 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 Sukuna and Yorozu's bodies erupted with terrifying impact injuries almost simultaneously, as if they were struck from all directions by invisible sledgehammers at the exact same time. Sukuna violently coughed up a mouthful of blood and fell straight to his knees. Yorozu had it even worse. Just a moment ago, Yorozu was as agile as a mountain dog, but now she lay on the ground like a flattened fly. The armor she used to defend her body shattered completely, and blood gushed from countless wounds on her body. The culprit behind all of this was that seemingly unremarkable man standing right behind Sukuna and Yorozu. Chapter 66, Vengeful Curse Spirit. 1449 words. Renji felt completely invincible at that moment. The only thing that made him a little embarrassed was that he had no clothes on, and they vanished during his very first technique release. After regaining his human form, he was speaking to Sukuna completely naked. After running for a moment, Renji found a piece of cloth from the ruins and tied it around his waist. Seeing him stand up once again threw the viewers into an absolute frenzy. In every corner of the world, countless people began shouting his name at the top of their lungs. "Go for it! Renji, you are the strongest!" Even the members of Jujutsu High stood up in utter shock. Higuruma, who only became a jujutsu sorcerer a short while ago, had never seen such a scene before. He opened his mouth and looked at Yuta beside him. "Okatsu, are binding vows really that convenient? You can just make one on the fly like that?" Of course not. Yuta immediately shot back. He was a bit worried that Higuruma would be misled by Renji and develop some strange ideas. Meanwhile, Shokoyeri had a vague speculation of her own. She previously performed an RCT on Renji after his technique release, making her the person who best understood his condition in that state. A binding vow that trades cursed energy for physical prowess definitely couldn't be established. However, Renji's situation is different. Because of his technique, his physical body turned into phenomena, and he himself possessed the RCT to reconstruct those phenomena back into flesh. He took advantage of the process of reconstructing his entire body, making himself like a caterpillar turning into a butterfly, and successfully inserted this binding vow. In the center of the battlefield, Renji stood on a pile of building ruins, looking down at Sukuna from a high vantage point. Sukuna. On the brink of death, I grasped the core of binding vows thanks to you. Renji mocked Sukuna wildly. The reason for your defeat is that you didn't immediately end my life with Fuga, and you failed to slice open my cocoon of evolution before I finished my awakening. The reason for my defeat. As if he had just heard something hilarious, Sukuna sneered. Propping his hands on his knees, Sukuna forced himself back up and glared at him with a grim expression. The battle has only just begun. Is that so? Yeah. I guess you're right. Renji laughed in response as Sukuna lunged forward. I just hope Sukuna won't be able to land consecutively Black Flash, or else I'm done for. As Sukuna had just deactivated his domain, he was in a state of curse technique burnout, and he could only use hand-to-hand combat. Yet, even in this state, Sukuna's sheer speed and power were more than enough to instantly eliminate most jujitsu sorcerers in the world. As Sukuna threw another straight punch, Renji's figure vanished on the spot. Under Sukuna's bewildered gaze, Renji reappeared right behind him. He raised a hand and looked at Sukuna with a smile. In the next instant, Renji's palm turned into a fist and struck Sukuna directly. Under the effect of the tremendous force, Sukuna's body flew straight back, pushed a deep trench into the ground, and crashed into a pile of ruins. Sukuna slumped in the debris, and could feel that from just a single punch, a massive portion of his body suffered severe damage. But despite this, as the king of curses, Sukuna didn't show the slightest panic. He forced a smile as he looked at the approaching Renji. What a monster! Sukuna quickly used the RCT to repair his body, and stood up from the ground once again, while his mind rapidly calculated his options. The brat's power isn't enough to instantly kill me. Since he has a physical body now, doesn't that mean he's no longer immune to my slashing attacks? In that case, I just need to stall for a few minutes until my technique burnout fades, then expand my domain again to win, right? In mere seconds, Sukuna finalized his strategy, stall for time, wait for his technique to recover, and expand his domain once more. However, even though he had a plan in mind, Sukuna still didn't assume anything too strictly. Who knows if I defeat him with my domain later, whether he will pull a new form out from somewhere else to fight me again. On the other side, Renji had no idea what Sukuna was thinking. However, just as the battle between Renji and Sukuna was about to ignite again, a resentful shriek suddenly echoed from the center of the battlefield. The crows dispatched by Mei Mei to monitor the fight captured the anomaly instantly and switched the camera display to the source of the sound. Yorozu, who had been lying on the ground and should have been completely dead, suddenly moved. To be precise, it wasn't Yorozu moving, but the blood surrounding her. Yorozu's blood flowed onto the ground, staining a large patch of ground red. The ground behaved like the surface of water, and sudden ripples were produced across it. The next second, a pitch-black monster arm abruptly thrust out from within it, and a tragic and unwilling voice echoed from the blood. Marriage, marriage. After the battle is over, I will marry Sukuna. Outside the live broadcast room, Yuta Okatsu bolted out of his chair. He was all too familiar with this sight. It was Yorozu. Yorozu, who was supposed to be dead, turned into a vengeful curse spirit. Only then did everyone remember that because of the binding vow, Renji locked away all the cursed energy throughout his body. This meant that his current attacks carried no cursed energy whatsoever, and wouldn't be able to kill Yuruzu. Normally, when a jujitsu sorcerer died, they simply died. However, if a jujitsu sorcerer was killed by someone without cursed energy, and the victim harbored intense resentment and malice, at the moment of death, they can manifest as a cursed spirit, just like Naoya Zenin after being killed by Maki's mother. In the battlefield, Renji frowned as he looked toward Yurozu's corpse. Even though he locked away most of his cursed energy due to the binding vow, Renji could see exactly what was happening at that moment. He saw something emerge on top of Yurozu's corpse. After a few moments, the cursed spirit form of Yurozu crawled completely out of the blood. Thanks to the fact that the feed transmitted by Mei's crows was a normal signal, even ordinary people clearly saw Yurozu's new form. It was a terrifying, pitch-black monster whose body looked as if it were forged from metal, covered entirely in sharp spikes. Yurozu opened her massive mouth and roared, her entire body radiating resentment. A massive amount of cursed energy erupted from her body, and even the people watching the live broadcast faintly felt a sense of oppression. As a cursed spirit, Yurozu's power had skyrocketed to another level, and her construction technique had been amplified even further. She screamed Sukuna's name at the top of her lungs. Sukuna, Sukuna, Sukuna. Call me, call me. Call my name, Sukuna. Unlike Rika Orimoto, who became a cursed spirit because Yuta inadvertently cursed her with his own cursed energy, essentially making her Yuta's personal entity who actively sought to protect him, Yurozu's resentment was generated entirely from herself. She wanted to be with Sukuna forever. As her soul deeply craved Sukuna's acknowledgement, Yurozu would only allow herself to be used by him once Sukuna actively expressed that he needed her. To the side, Sukuna, who was just preparing to stall for time, suddenly burst out laughing. He didn't expect Yurozu's obsession to be so intense that she actually turned into such a terrifying vengeful cursed spirit after death. He called out toward Yurozu's direction with ease. Yurozu, I am here. Hearing her name called, Yurozu froze for a second before blitzing toward Sukuna, at a speed so fast that even Renji barely tracked it. Yurozu's body coiled around Sukuna like a massive metallic serpent, and she wrapped herself directly around Sukuna in tight coils. Sukuna, Sukuna. Say you want to be with me. Say you want to be with me. Sukuna gently rested his hand against her metallic body. Of course. I want to be with you. As if hearing the sweetest words of love, Yurozu threw her head back and roared with exhilaration into the sky. Shouted out, Sukuna. With your burning soul. Ah! A roar erupted from Sukuna's mouth. He growled the words Yurozu desired to hear most toward her massive form. Yurozu. Be with me. In Curcio. Chapter 67, Chapter 67, Demon. 1187 words. Renji's expression changed. Even though he didn't know what was about to happen, his instincts told him that interrupting Sukuna's action was absolutely a good choice. In an instant, Renji lunged forward like a bullet, aiming directly at Sukuna. However, Renji's movement already attracted Yurozu's attention. Don't stop me from being with Sukuna. The next moment, the flesh of Yurozu that was enveloping Sukuna began to tighten, completely swallowing him into her body. Renji's fist struck Yurozu's body directly, but apart from making a sound like hitting metal, nothing happened. This is hard. Renji cried out in shock. He never expected that with his current level of physical strength, there would actually be something he couldn't break through. Through the gaps in Yurozu's coiling body, Sukuna looked out at him with a mocking gaze, as if laughing at his utter powerlessness. The development of the situation exceeded everyone's expectations. In less than a single second, the situation changed completely. Sukuna, who had just been sent flying by Renji moments ago, bizarrely began to merge with Yurozu. Before everyone's eyes, Yurozu's upper torso split wide open down the middle, and her ribs parted to the left and right like a massive mouth, tightly swallowing Sukuna's body inside. After that, Yurozu's body began to shrink. The originally massive body compressed continuously, and within a single breath, Yurozu's form vanished from people's sight. In its place, Sukuna reappeared in the display. Except now, Sukuna was completely covered in pitch-black metallic armor with long, sharp claws on his hands, making him look exactly like a demon straight out of the depths of hell. Sukuna's mouth tore open all the way to his ears, revealing teeth filled with sharp spikes. Now, Sukuna no longer showed a single trace of human appearance. Rather than a human, he was more like a demon in a human form. Sukuna stared at him with a sadistic smirk. "Brat, do you still remember what I said? The battle has only just begun." In a single instant, Sukuna fully understood the capabilities of this armor. After turning into a cursed spirit, on top of retaining her own construction technique, Yorozu's entire body turned into liquid metal that she could manipulate. After merging with Sukuna, Yorozu's entire body compressed and reshaped itself, directly forming a set of armor over his skin. Sukuna's body, now infused with metal, received a massive boost to its strength, defense, and speed. By relying solely on the raw enhancements provided by the armor, Sukuna could exert the combat power of a standard special grade. Furthermore, what made Sukuna even more delighted was that after merging with Yorozu, the special grade cursed energy of the cursed spirit Yorozu directly became his external cursed energy source. Even though this capacity of cursed energy couldn't compare to Sukuna's original self, it was still a very massive amount of cursed energy. Sukuna could clearly feel that the cursed energy he spent in battle today was completely replenished by Yorozu. In other words, despite Renji fighting on Sukuna for so long, right now, apart from a slight strain on his brain from using domain expansion, Sukuna was currently in perfect condition. Sukuna's words were absolutely right. The battle had only just begun. Just as Renji prepared to continue the battle, a piercing sound suddenly came. It was a katana. Maki appeared out of nowhere right behind Sukuna. She gripped the katana made by her sister, Mai, at the cost of her life, and thrust it straight toward the back of Sukuna's heart. Sukuna let out a cold laugh, lightly twisted his body, and easily dodged the sneak attack from Maki. The current Sukuna wasn't the same Sukuna from the original plot, who was worn down by everyone in turns. In his current state, it was utterly impossible for Maki to land a sneak attack on him. Seeing that her sneak attack failed, Maki clicked her tongue and immediately retreated. Naturally, Maki wasn't the only one attacking Sukuna. At the exact moment her strike failed, Kinji Hikari descended from the sky with his fists wrapped in a massive cursed energy. Sukuna shifted slightly to the side, causing Hikari's attack to crash into empty space. Hikari's fist smashed into the ground, unleashing a violent shockwave. During the brief interval when Sukuna completed his merge with Yorozu, the reinforcements from Jujutsu High, Maki Zenin, and Kinji Hikari finally arrived at the battlefield. The reinforcements weren't over yet, as a bold voice traveled down from the sky. Well, I can't let you two steal all the spotlight. It was Ishigori. He came to join the fun too. Ishigori arrived above the battlefield at some point, and one granite blast after another fired out from his pompadour hair, aiming directly at Sukuna in the center of the battlefield. I'm still right here, watch where you're aiming. Hikari yelled, scrambling backward to get out of the blast zone. Ishigori's granite blast shot at Sukuna, blasting deep craters into the surrounding ground. A massive cloud of smoke and dust billowed up, completely swallowing Sukuna inside. Ishigori stroked his hairstyle with satisfaction, casually calling back to Hikari. What's the big deal? You already hit the jackpot anyway, and aren't you immortal? Looking at Maki Zenin, Kinji Hikari, and Ryu Ishigori, who had suddenly appeared on the battlefield, Renji felt a massive headache coming on. He didn't feel a shred of relief, only pure terror. Why did you guys come here? Didn't I tell you not to come so soon? Ishigori looked at him with total indifference. Isn't your technique release already over? Since you won't accidentally injure us anymore, it's obviously easier if we take him on together. That logic made sense. Taking on a normal opponent together was perfectly fine, but right now, their opponent was Sukuna. The situation was completely different. Before he could explain out loud, Renji's expression changed instantly. Ishigori, watch out. Relying on his heightened perception, Renji realized that Sukuna was blitzing toward them. In the next fraction of a second, Renji's body vanished from his spot, and the ground exploded into a deep crater from the recoil. Even though Renji's speed was already incredibly fast, Sukuna's speed also became very fast after being enhanced by Yorozu's armor. Before Renji could intercept him, Sukuna had already arrived right in front of Ishigori. Even though Ishigori blasted Sukuna with cursed energy cannons for so long just now, Sukuna didn't even acknowledge Ishigori's presence in his eyes. Even though Ishigori had just bombarded Sukuna with his granite blast for a while, Sukuna didn't even acknowledge Ishigori's existence in his eyes. He only wanted to resume his unfinished battle with Renji. "Don't get in my way. I'm in a hurry." Sukuna's razor-sharp talons swept across Ishigori's head, slicing through it like a hot knife through foam. Suddenly, 3 lines of blood appeared across Ishigori's face. In just a single fraction of a second. This meant from 400 years ago, known as having the highest output of cursed energy in the history of the Date clan from the Mutsu region, Ishigori Ryu was defeated. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a story.